Hi, I'm Sarah, and today I'm going to share a story that's very personal to me. It's about my family, the struggles we went through, and how things went wrong because of favoritism. Before I start, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more real-life stories like this. Now, let's begin. Growing up in a family where you're not the favorite is really hard. Imagine always being in the shadow of your younger brother, Ryan, just because he overcame serious health issues as a baby. No matter what my older brother Jon and I did, it was never enough. My mom would always ask, "Sarah, can you help Ryan with his homework again?" It didn't matter if I had my own work to do, Ryan's needs were always more important. At dinner, the conversation was always about Ryan. "Did you hear? Ryan got the lead role in the school play," my dad would brag, as if Jon and I hadn't achieved anything ourselves. Our successes were usually met with a simple, "That's nice," or a distracted nod. Jon was always quiet, but over the years, I could see the frustration building up inside him. Things really hit a breaking point when we were in college. We both went to the same university, which should have been a time for us to be closer, but instead, Ryan caused more problems. One evening, I found Ryan in the living room, looking guilty as he quickly closed some tabs on the computer. "What are you doing on Jon's laptop?" I asked. "Just borrowing some notes," Ryan muttered, but his smirk told me something else was going on. A few days later, Jon was in a panic. "I can't find my final project. It's like it disappeared from my laptop," he said, his voice full of fear and anger. After some searching, we found out that Ryan had deleted Jon's entire semester's work. "Why would you do that?" I confronted Ryan later. "Come on, Sarah, it's just a bit of sibling rivalry. Besides, Jon's always been too good at everything. He needed to be knocked down a bit," Ryan said casually, as if he hadn't just destroyed Jon's hard work. That was the last straw for Jon. "I can't take it anymore," he told me one evening as he packed up his things. "I'm tired of always being second best in my own family because of him." And with that, Jon moved out. He cut off most of his ties with our family, leaving without looking back. It wasn't just about the project. It was years of feeling ignored and unappreciated, all coming to a head with that one act of betrayal by Ryan. As Jon drove away that night, I knew things would never be the same. I stood in the driveway, watching the taillights disappear into the distance. I knew then that things would never be the same. Our family was broken, and deep down, I feared it was beyond repair. That's where I'll pause the story for now. There's a lot more drama to unfold. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates. Next time, I'll talk about how Jon managed to rebuild his life and the new challenges he faced. Stick around, it's going to be quite the journey. After Jon left our family home, he didn't just survive, he thrived. His journey of building a new life, far from the toxic environment of our family, eventually led him to Emily, a woman whose strength and understanding matched his own. Today, I'll dive into that chapter of his life, revealing how he found happiness and love amid the chaos. "Are you sure about this place?" Emily asked as they toured a potential venue for their wedding. The sun set perfectly behind the hills, casting a golden glow that seemed to mark the beginning of a new chapter. "Absolutely, Emily, it's perfect, just like us. It's far away from everything, and everyone, that made life difficult," Jon replied, his eyes focused on the venue but also on a future free of past hurts and resentments. As they planned their wedding, the topic of family naturally came up. "Jon, I know it's tough, but are you sure we shouldn't invite Ryan? Maybe it's time to mend things," Emily suggested gently one evening, her voice soft as she tried to tread carefully on the sensitive topic. Jon paused, his voice heavy with the weight of the past. "I've tried, Emily, but Ryan hasn't changed. Remember last Christmas when I tried to reach out? All he did was brag about his new car, like everything's a competition." "Yeah, I remember. He could barely say congratulations on our engagement without turning the conversation to his promotion at work," Emily said, her frustration showing. "Okay, no Ryan, but what about your parents? I want them there. Despite everything, they're still my parents. But if they choose Ryan over coming to our wedding, that's on them," Jon said, his decision firm but with a touch of sadness. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful ceremony set against the backdrop of the hills they had fallen in love with. I was there, watching as Jon and Emily exchanged vows, a testament to their strength and love. The absence of our parents, who chose to stay with Ryan, lingered in the air, but it didn't ruin the happiness of the day. At the reception, amidst the laughter and music, Emily leaned over to Jon and whispered, "I know today is bittersweet without your parents here, but remember, we are our own family now. And Sarah is here, right? Jan smiled, squeezing Emily's hand. You're right. Sarah being here means the world to me. It shows who really supports us, who truly cares. Later that night, as we danced under the string lights, Jan came over to me. Thanks for being here, Sarah. It means more than you know. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Jan. Seeing you this happy is all I could ask for, I replied, feeling both joy for him and a pang of sadness for the family members who weren't present. As the night drew to a close, Jan and Emily stood together, looking out at the guests, people who were part of their chosen family. They had built a circle of love and support, far from the judgment and competition of our family home. Jan's story of finding love and creating a new life is a reminder of how much strength it takes to choose happiness over sticking with what's familiar. Tune in next time as I reveal more about the twists and turns our family went through, and how Jan continued to face challenges, especially at the annual family dinner. At that dinner, the air was thick with tension, like a pot about to boil over. We were seated in a grand dining room where every plate and piece of silverware seemed to echo the unresolved conflicts of our past. Jan and Emily entered, bracing themselves for the usual drama that clung to our family gatherings like an unwelcome shadow. As the evening wore on, Ryan made his entrance, wearing a smug smile as he introduced his wife, Lisa. Lisa had once been romantically involved with Jan, making the situation even more uncomfortable. Looks like I got the better end of the deal, huh? Ryan joked loudly, nudging Jan in a way that felt more like provocation than brotherly banter. His comment about stealing Jan's ex-girlfriend hung in the air, each word a deliberate poke at old wounds. Emily's face flushed with anger as she watched Ryan smirk. She turned to him, her voice steady but laced with the frustration that had been building all night. Really, Ryan? Is this how you show your maturity? Bragging about things that aren't even true? It's pathetic. Ryan laughed, a hollow sound that did nothing to calm the tension. Emily, relax. I was just joking. You married folks take everything too seriously. That's not a joke, Ryan, Emily shot back, now standing, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. It's a cheap jab in front of everyone. Jan ended that relationship for reasons you clearly don't respect. As Emily's voice rose, the rest of the family shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. The sound of silverware clinking stopped for a moment as our mother tried to calm things down. Her voice was soft, though you could hear her bias. Emily, dear, let's not make a scene. Ryan didn't mean anything by it. But Emily wasn't having it. No, I think it's time we talk about the elephant in the room. Ryan has always been spoiled, and it's time someone called him out. His entitlement, and you too, she pointed to our parents, have let him get away with it. The room went silent. You could feel the tension in the air. Jan reached for Emily's hand, silently showing his support. Ryan, you spent your whole life trying to compete with me. For what? To prove you're better? You're not. You're just willing to step on others to get what you want, Jan said firmly. Ryan's face turned red, his usual arrogance fading. You think you're so perfect, Jan? Just because you moved out, you think you can judge me? You left us. I left a toxic environment that you love, Ryan, Jan replied. And I'm better off for it. The dinner ended quickly. The festive mood was gone, replaced by a heavy silence as Jan and Emily walked out. The rest of the family sat in shock, left to think about the hard truths that had been spoken. The confrontation wasn't just about words. It was about deep-rooted issues that could no longer be ignored. What was supposed to be a happy family dinner had turned into a battleground where long-hidden resentments came to light. It wasn't about a simple comment or an old girlfriend anymore, it was about years of unfairness and hurt that had finally reached the breaking point. The fallout from the dinner came fast. Word of Emily's passionate defense of Jan spread among our relatives, and the rift in the family grew deeper. The next morning, Jan got messages from cousins, all shocked and supportive of him. Just saw the video. Can't believe it took this long for someone to put Ryan in his place, one cousin texted, with a mix of surprise and relief. Another cousin called, frustrated. I always knew Ryan was a jerk, but this? This is something else. Emily really spoke for all of us last night. As the video of the confrontation spread, Ryan and our parents scrambled to save their reputations. Ryan called Jon early that morning, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "You need to tell everyone Emily overreacted, Jon. You know how she can get. Just smooth things over, man." Jon remained calm, his frustration built up over the years. "No, Ryan. I'm not covering for you anymore." Emily said what needed to be said. "You need to start taking responsibility for your actions." Their parents also got involved, pleading with Jon during a tense phone call. "Your brother is hurt, Jon. Can't you see what this is doing to the family?" their mother asked, her voice cracking with emotion. Their father, more forceful, added, "You need to control your wife, Jon. She's tearing this family apart." Jon's response was steady, but firm. "No, Dad. What's tearing this family apart is years of ignoring Ryan's behavior and brushing the rest of us aside. I stand by Emily," she spoke the truth. The wider family had mixed reactions. Some pulled away, uncomfortable with the conflict, while others found the courage to speak up, inspired by Emily's boldness. Family gatherings became tense, filled with whispered conversations and awkward glances. In one revealing phone call, an aunt admitted, "We've all seen it for years, but no one wanted to stir the pot. Ryan's always been your parents' favorite, and it hasn't done him any favors." Emily, tired but determined, replied, "I know it's messy, but maybe it's time everything came out. We can't heal as a family if we keep pretending these problems don't exist." As the weeks passed, Emily's outburst, which had been recorded, sparked conversations throughout the family. People began talking about favoritism, fairness, and how families should really treat each other. Jon and Emily found themselves at the center of a family storm, but for the first time, they weren't alone in their fight for respect and recognition. The video exposed long-hidden issues, forcing the family to face uncomfortable truths. Though painful, it was a necessary step toward understanding and, possibly, healing. But for Jon and Emily, it became clear that their path was different now, with or without the family's approval. As the dust settled from the drama, Jon and Emily made a tough but necessary decision. Sitting in their living room, they discussed their future with new clarity, shaped by the chaos of recent events. "Emily, I can't keep going back and forth, hoping things will change. It's not healthy for us or for our baby on the way," Jon said firmly. Emily nodded, resting her hand on her belly. "I agree, Jon. We need to focus on our family now. What kind of environment do we want for our child?" They made the decision to cut ties with Ryan and their parents. This wasn't a sudden choice, but the result of years of neglect and unresolved conflict. Jon carefully drafted an email to his parents, making their decision clear. "Mom and Dad, after much thought, Emily and I have decided to distance ourselves for the sake of our family's well-being. We need to focus on raising our child in a positive and supportive environment, free from the constant conflict of the past." With that, they chose a new path, one focused on building a better future for their own family. Their parents responded quickly, filled with pleas and accusations, but Jon and Emily stayed firm. They ignored the phone calls and left messages unread. It was a hard process, but it had to be done. Meanwhile, Sarah, also chose to support Jon and Emily. During a small family meeting with just the three of us, I told them how much I stood by their decision. "You both have always been there for me. Unlike Ryan or even Mom and Dad lately, I'm with you, whatever you need," I said. Jon smiled and squeezed my hand. "Thanks, Sarah. It means everything to know you're with us. Let's focus on the family we choose, not just the one we were born into." As Jon and Emily prepared for their baby's arrival, they found peace and happiness in their new life. They worked on the nursery, picking out colors and decorations that represented a fresh start. Emily, being the planner, made sure everything was just right, and this attention to detail brought them both comfort. One evening, after setting up the crib, Emily turned to Jon thoughtfully. "Do you ever think about the future and what it'll be like for our child?" Jon finished placing a stuffed animal in the crib and wrapped his arms around her. "I do, and I know that with us as their parents, they'll grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally. That's all we can hope for." As the seasons changed and spring began, it symbolized the new beginnings in Jon and Emily's lives. The support they received from me and other family members helped reassure them that they had made the right decision. It wasn't just about leaving behind the toxic past, It was about building a future based on respect, love, and understanding. Standing in the nursery, looking out at the blooming garden, Jon and Emily knew they had made the right choice. They were ready to welcome their child into a world filled with hope, one they had created, far away from the shadows of the past. That's the end of the story. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Jon and Emily were right to cut ties with their family, or could they have handled it differently? Share your opinions in the comments below. If you liked this story and want to hear more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life.
Because I've been leading a self-indulgent life without looking after myself. Grace, the elderly woman I visited for home care, sighed as if she had known this was coming all along. The news had arrived that Grace's estranged son had passed away. Grace went back to her room and said, "Please, leave me alone for a while." I could faintly hear Grace sobbing inside the room, but I couldn't think of any words to comfort her. Having lost my son before, I knew from experience that no words of encouragement could touch the heart at such a time. I left a sandwich in front of her room and wrote a note saying, "Please eat a little, if you can." An hour later, Grace called me in. "Thank you for the sandwich. It was delicious." She had a bright face as if she had wiped away all her sadness. It seemed like she was putting on a brave face not to worry me. Grace, with her usual calm expression, said, "Chloe, I hate to ask, but could you go to the office and submit the death certificate for my son? It's hard to get around in a wheelchair." "Understood, I'll take care of it." Having lost my own son, Stephen, just a year ago, I was more than willing to help. After completing the paperwork without any issues, Grace called me in again and said, "Chloe, you have really taken good care of me this past year. Thank you. But you don't have to worry about me anymore. You can stop coming from tomorrow. Today will be your last day." I felt a darkness envelop me. How am I supposed to raise my young grandson William from now on? My name is Chloe, in my 60s. Once, in my 30s, I dated a man named Thomas, and we had a son together. We'll build a wonderful family together, the three of us. That was my promise, but somewhere along the line, everything went wrong. As soon as Thomas and I got married, his once kind demeanor completely changed. He started to vent his frustrations on Stephen and me when work didn't go well. Complaints about dinner being late, the child's crying being annoying, and lashing out at us over any little thing that didn't go his way. At first, I tried to endure it, but Thomas's behavior only got worse day by day. His outbursts became so uncontrollable that not even my voice could reach him, and I too started to feel cornered. Enough is enough. I can't follow you any further. It's one thing for me, but I don't want Stephen to suffer the consequences. Wanting to protect young Stephen from the fallout, at 40, I decided to divorce Thomas. Do as you please. If you think you can survive on your own, then go ahead. I understood Thomas's warning, but my desire to escape the harsh reality was stronger, so I took young Stephen and left the house. Stephen was just 6 years old then, barely starting elementary school. After finding a small, affordable apartment and finishing the move, can I really raise Stephen to be a fine person on my own? I watched the setting sun and wondered. But seeing Stephen's carefree smile made all those worries dissipate like fog. "Stephen, from now on, it's just you and Mom, but we'll make it through." And I promised. Stephen would amusingly share various events from school, and I never felt the hardship. I started working part-time at a supermarket to support us, and when I came home tired, Stephen would run up to me and massage my shoulders. "Thank you always. Stephen, you're really thoughtful and kind." "It's nothing. It's because you always work so hard for me, Mom." His words would instantly lift all the fatigue of the day. However, living on a part-time income only increased my anxiety about the future. Thinking about Stephen's school fees and entrance exams, it was clear that things would get financially tighter. So, I decided to boldly step into the caregiving profession. With an aging society, the demand for caregivers would only grow, and if I could get the qualifications, I wouldn't have to worry about food on the table. Convinced of this, I worked as a caregiver while acquiring various related qualifications. Even as Stephen entered his sensitive teenage years, He grew into the same pure-hearted child and started part-time work in high school. I didn't want to overburden Steven, who was preparing for exams, but he would smile and say, "This is for my own good. Part-time work is part of learning about society. It will surely help me when I look for a job later." After graduating from high school, Steven got a job at a small local factory. Around this time, Steven had a fateful encounter with a woman. She was an office clerk at the same company, Isabella, who was 2 years younger than Steven. "It's nice to meet you. My name is Isabella, and I'm dating Steven." I was convinced that she would be a good match for Steven and blessed their relationship from the bottom of my heart. Moreover, Isabella was 4 months pregnant with Steven's child. "I'm becoming a grandmother already," so I joked. Reflecting on my past, I had Steven in my mid-30s, which was close to being a late pregnancy. The childbirth and parenting were quite challenging, considering they were still in their 20s. "If you ever have any trouble, feel free to consult me. I won't hesitate to help in any way I can." I offered my support to the young couple, hoping they wouldn't have to endure the hardships I did. "Thank you so much, Chloe." Isabella came to cherish me like her own mom, especially since she had lost her parents just before her marriage, a time when she felt very vulnerable. Soon after getting married, Steven and Isabella rented an affordable apartment nearby. Half a year later, Isabella gave birth to a healthy boy. They named him William. "William, it's your grandmother. Nice to meet you." I couldn't help but smile as I looked at William. "I wonder who he resembles. Does he have Steven's nose?" "It's too early to tell," Steven said with a wry smile next to me, and the nurse laughed amusingly. Following the birth, Isabella decided to quit her job and focus on raising her child. "I can't be left behind." Wanting to support Isabella in any way, I spent my savings on baby supplies. Isabella was astonished when she returned home from the hospital. "Wow, Chloe. When did you manage all this?" She was so touched that she started laughing at the entrance. Steven commented with an amused voice, "It seems like you're going to spoil the grandchild." I didn't mind what anyone said. Of course, Steven's child would be dear to me. "Isabella, if you ever have trouble with childcare, call me anytime. I'll come running," I said earnestly, but Steven coolly retorted, "You just want to see William, don't you, Mom?" Caught me. I could only respond with a wry smile. When William turned 3 and began to walk and talk on his own, Isabella started working part-time to support the family. During weekdays, she would leave William at a childcare center and pick him up in the evening after her part-time job. To lighten her load, I eagerly took on the role of babysitting William on weekends. As I played horseback rides with William on my back. "Don't get too carried away. You're not young anymore, you might hurt your back." "Don't treat me like an old lady. I still feel young at heart." "I need you to stay healthy for me, Mom. At least until William grows up and gets married." Steven's roundabout way of showing care deeply touched me, despite my aging body. 5 years had passed since Steven and Isabella's marriage. One day, Steven approached me with an unusual seriousness. "Mom, there's something I want to ask of you." Never having asked for anything from his parents before, Steven's request made me nervous. "What's with the formal request?" "We've been married for 5 years now, and we thought it might be nice to go on a trip, just the two of us, to relax for a bit." Relieved by his explanation, I responded, "So you're asking me to look after William while you're gone? Is that it?" "Would that be okay?" "You've finally become a bit more childlike. You never used to rely on your parents." "Hey, I'm 27 years old now. Calling a 27-year-old adult childlike is a bit much." Although Steven complained with a strong tone, his expression was smiling. "Sure, go on your trip. Take your time and enjoy yourselves." "Thank you, Mom. I'll make it up to you someday." With those words, Steven and Isabella rented a car and went on their trip. However, I couldn't shake off a sense of unease that I couldn't explain. What is this anxiety? I hope nothing happens. That day, I had the day off from my caregiving job, so I could spend the whole day with William. I remembered that we had an old deck of cards in the back of the closet that I bought for Steven a long time ago. "How about we play some cards?" "I want to play." William eagerly raised his hand in response. William quickly learned the rules of the game. "You're so smart, William. You picked it up right away. It's boring to play alone. I want to play with Dad and Mom next time." By 9 p.m., even the energetic William had tired himself out and dozed off on the couch. "You'll catch a cold sleeping there," I said as I picked him up and carried him to the futon in the bedroom. When did William get so heavy? I used to be able to lift him so easily. I was reminded once again of how quickly children grow. Just as Stephen said before they left, I have to live a long life, at least until William grows up and gets married. Thinking this, I gazed at William's face, now peaceful and asleep in my arms, wishing for this happiness to last forever. Then, suddenly, the phone rang. It was unusual for anyone to call me at 9 p.m. A bad premonition ran through my mind. Tentatively, I picked up the receiver, and it was from an unfamiliar regional hospital. The person on the other end spoke in a calm tone, methodically explaining the situation, but each word felt like a curse, darkening my vision. "Excuse me, what are you saying? Stephen and Isabella are both in critical condition, unconscious. It's a dangerous situation that requires immediate attention." "What's wrong, Grandma?" William, sensing something unsettling in my somber expression, looked up at me worriedly. "William, let's get changed quickly." After hurriedly dressing a sleepy William, without caring what I was wearing, I asked a neighbor to drive us to the hospital where Stephen and his wife were taken. Upon arriving at the hospital and walking down the dimly lit corridor of the emergency department, "This way." The nurse led us to the ICU. Both were in the intensive care unit, motionless with tubes inserted in their mouths. "Stephen! Stephen!" No matter how much I called out, Stephen didn't respond, just like a doll. "Mom! Mom!" William also repeatedly called for his mom, but the response was the same. Eventually, without regaining consciousness, both their heartbeats stopped, and a moment of silence fell in the ICU. Breaking the silence, "Stephen!" I shouted the name of my beloved Stephen. In the end, both of them didn't make it. After calming down a bit, the local police hesitantly explained the situation of the accident. Unable to respond properly to a car driving the wrong way, this was the result. Their words swirled in my head, causing confusion. That night, Stephen appeared in my dreams smiling and waving at me. I was incredibly angry. "You idiot. You told me to live a long life until William gets married, and what about you? Why did you have to go before me?" I yelled at him over and over. I wanted to run to Stephen and hug him tightly, but his intangible body slipped through my arms. Eventually, Stephen took Isabella's hand and walked into the light, heading towards heaven. "You two are really foolish." When I woke up, my cheeks were wet with tears. William gently wiped them away with his hand. "Don't cry, Grandma." Being comforted by William, how foolish I am. I can't stay down forever. "William, Dad and Mom are gone, but from now on, it's just you and me. Let's live our lives together, supporting each other. I still have things I must do. For the sake of raising the only family I have left, William, I switched to a better-paying home care job. I was dispatched through a referral to the mansion of an elderly woman in her late 80s named Grace Smith. She seemed to be quite wealthy as the mansion was spacious, but Grace was living there all by herself. I wonder what I'll do if she's difficult to deal with. The world she lives in seemed so different from mine, it was overwhelming. Even before entering, my anxiety only grew. But I can't afford to complain when it's all for William. I chided myself for wanting to whine. The mansion was too large for one person to live in, especially since Grace had been living in a wheelchair for many years. I sympathized with Grace, thinking how hard it must be to move around such a large house. The pathway leading to the entrance had a gentle slope and handrails installed. As expected of a wealthy person, the accessibility features were impressive. When I rang the doorbell and introduced myself as a caregiver, a dignified elderly lady greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome. I am the owner of this house, Grace Smith. Nice to meet you, I'm Chloe. Your garden flowers are beautiful." I complimented the splendidly blooming flowers in the flower bed as a greeting. I was advised by a senior caregiver that it would be good to start the conversation from there, assuming she had a strong interest in flowers. As I hoped, Grace's face softened even more with a gentle and kind expression. "Oh, I'm delighted to hear such words from someone as young as you." Although I felt a bit resistant to being called young, I graciously thanked her. Grace was never arrogant. She treated me rather like a family member, which made me feel at ease. "From the first time we met, I didn't feel like you were a stranger. I wonder why. Is it because of your name?" "My name, Chloe?" "Long ago, it was the name of a woman who had a connection to me. Sorry for the unnecessary story." "No, it's fine." Then, as we spent time drinking coffee, we gradually started to share stories about our lives every day. Grace's husband had passed away from an illness a few years ago, and she had been living alone in a wheelchair since. "Do you have any other family?" Grace looked sad as she responded. "I do have a son, but he only comes by when he's short on money. It's boring to talk about this with you." I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled awkwardly. "What about your family, Chloe?" "I had a son, but he recently passed away in an accident." "That's terribly sad. There's no greater sorrow than losing a child." Grace squeezed my hand gently to comfort me. "Fortunately, I was blessed with a grandson, William. He's a 5-year-old boy, quite mischievous, but he's the reason I can find the strength to keep living." "That's wonderful. Having someone precious to protect is a beautiful thing. It becomes a reason to live." Grace also said, "If you'd like, bring him over sometime. It must be lonely for him to stay at home alone." Taking her up on her offer, I brought William over the next weekend. Upon seeing William, Grace narrowed her eyes. "Oh, this child is..." and tilted her head. "Is there something about William?" Grace laughed off in haste. "No, nothing at all, dear. It's just that, as one ages, everything seems to remind one of the past." I was curious about Grace's remark, but she didn't seem inclined to elaborate. "What's your name?" "William." "Nice to meet you." "How admirable. What's your dad's name?" "Stephen." "And your grandfather's name?" William, looking puzzled, shook his head and then looked at me. William didn't know anything about his grandfather, and I had never told him anything, so he couldn't answer. "I'm sorry, Grace. I've never talked to him about his grandfather." Grace smiled. "I'm sorry for asking such strange questions," she said, gently patting William's head. A year after I started caring for Grace, news arrived that Grace's estranged son had passed away. "Because I've been leading a self-indulgent life without looking after myself," Grace murmured with a sigh, as if she had known this was going to happen from the start. But when she returned to her room, "Please, leave me alone for a while." I could faintly hear Grace sobbing inside, but I couldn't think of any words of comfort to offer. Having lost my son before, I knew from experience that no words of encouragement could reach the heart at such a time. I left a sandwich in front of her room. "Please eat a little, if you can," and wrote a note saying. An hour later, Grace called me in. "Thank you for the sandwich. It was delicious." She had a face as if she had wiped away all her sorrow. It seemed like she was trying not to worry me. Grace, with her usual calm expression, said, "Chloe, I hate to ask, but could you go to the office and submit the death certificate for my son? It's hard to get around with these legs." "Understood, I'll take care of it." Having lost Stephen just a year ago, I readily agreed to help. Several documents were needed to submit the death certificate. When I went to the office reception to prepare each document, I discovered an unexpected truth. The deceased son's name was listed as Thomas Smith, a name I couldn't possibly forget, the name of the man I once loved, Stephen's dad, and William's grandfather. How could this? How could this? Learning this shocking truth, I suddenly cried at the reception, bewildering the staff. "Are you all right? Can we help you?" Trying to appear calm, I ended up with a forced, awkward smile. Struggling to stand up straight, my vision blurred, and I fainted. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a bed in the office's medical room. "I'm sorry for the trouble." "Thank you." I hastily got up, overwhelmed by apology and embarrassment. "Please, don't overdo it. It's tough losing a loved one." I thanked the staff repeatedly, gathered my things, and immediately returned to Grace's house. Seeing me burst in, Grace looked startled. "Chloe, what's happened to you? You look so scared." I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. Despite not being angry, my expression could easily be mistaken for fury. "Grace, your son's name was Thomas Smith, wasn't it?" "Yes, that's right." "What about it?" I swallowed hard, then took a deep breath before replying. "Thomas Smith was my ex-husband." "Oh." Grace let out a gasp of shock upon learning this fact. "So, Chloe was really you." Tears began to well up in Grace's eyes. She then shared a truth she had kept hidden in her heart. Thomas had clashed with his wealthy father and left home right after dropping out of college. Since then, he had been estranged from his family, only starting to visit his mother after his father passed away. During that time, Thomas and I met and I became pregnant with our first son, Stephen. But when I suggested that Thomas should at least greet his parents, "There's no need. I'm not showing my face at that man's place," he stubbornly refused, so I couldn't say anything more. As a result, I never met my in-laws before divorcing Thomas. Grace mentioned she had suspected when she heard the name Chloe, as I had returned to my maiden name, but she wasn't sure. I also hadn't imagined that Smith, a common surname, could be my ex-husband's family. After completing the death certificate without any issues, Grace called me again. "Chloe, you've really helped me a lot over this past year. Thank you. But you don't have to come from tomorrow. Today will be your last day." The sudden notice of termination made me feel as if the ground had disappeared beneath me. How was I going to raise young William now? Sensing my unease, Grace smiled kindly as usual. "Oh dear, please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying this because I've come to dislike you." I tried desperately to understand Grace's true intentions. "It might be presumptuous to ask, but if you're willing, Chloe, would you consider living with me? William too, of course." Tears welled up in my eyes as I finally grasped Grace's intent. "I don't mind, but are you sure?" "Good or bad, you're family. And family should live together." "Hey William, do you remember the grandma we met before?" "Yeah, I remember. Grandma Grace was very kind." "That grandma is your grandfather's mom, your great-grandma." William tilted his head, seemingly puzzled by the concept of a great-grandma. "Grandma Grace said she'd like us to live with her, the three of us. What do you think?" Without hesitation, William exclaimed, "Yay! I love that grandma too." And so, William and I began our new life living with Grace in her mansion. As William grew, he began to resemble Stephen more and more. "William is getting so big. Watching him reminds me of Thomas as a child," Grace said, watching William with a loving gaze. "Grandma Grace, let's play cards together." "Let's do that. We can eat some cookies too." Perhaps it's the blood connection, but William has grown quite fond of Grace. With this strong family bond, I felt confident going out to my home care visits, knowing William was in good hands. To ensure I see William's happiness with my own eyes, I knew I had to stay healthy. On the anniversaries of Stephen and Isabella's passing, Grace, William, and I would visit their graves. "Stephen, Isabella, William is doing well in school. He even won first place in a marathon recently. Isn't that great?" And then, "I wish I could have met Stephen while he was still alive," Grace said, standing beside me. The cemetery has become more accessible nowadays, with elevators installed throughout. Thanks to this, Grace could visit more easily in her wheelchair. "Now, it's Thomas's turn." "Chloe, are you sure?" I squeezed Grace's hand. "Thomas is an important family member who brought us all together. Without him, Stephen and William wouldn't have been born," I said, patting William on the head. "I know it might be selfish of me, but if you're okay with it, Grace, could we have Stephen and Isabella's remains moved to the Smith family grave?" "Of course. We're family, after all." A chill seemed to pass through us as the wind blew. "Aren't you cold?" William moved closer to Grace, holding her hand. "Your hand is warm." "And your body is warm too." As we headed towards Thomas's grave, I pushed Grace's wheelchair forward. "This time, give the baby to your brother. You can just have another one." After I announced my pregnancy to my parents, my mother uttered those unbelievable words. Brother Zach and his wife Rosie, who is infertile, demanded that I give up my child for adoption to them. My parents have always prioritized Zach over everything and neglected me. The hopeful future I had envisioned upon conceiving my first child turned into despair. My name is Olivia. I've been married to my husband Walt for 3 years. Our marriage is great, and we've been talking like we want a child soon. However, I've kept some distance from my family home. The reason lies with my parents and my brother Zach. At the family home, my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie live together. Zach was a prodigy since childhood and graduated from a prestigious university. He now secured a job at a major corporation. He is set to join and eventually take over our father's company. Our parents have adored him since he was young. In comparison, I wasn't very smart and had average looks, so I don't have many memories of being cherished by our parents. From a young age, I was always confused by the difference in treatment between Zach and me, often feeling down alone. Especially our mother, she was always with him, clearly showing he was her favorite. As for me, she mostly ignored me. When she did talk, it was usually to put me down. Perhaps influenced by our parents, Zach looked down on me too, so we never had a good sibling relationship. I felt I had no place at home and grew increasingly isolated. For those reasons, as soon as I graduated high school, I left home. My parents, seemingly uninterested in me, didn't say much when I announced my departure. In fact, they seemed almost pleased. After leaving, I got a job. And 3 years later, I married Walt, who was a classmate from high school. I was eager to build my own family and find my peace, away from the influence of my family. I only return home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'd rather not go, but my parents insist. They worry about appearances, and a daughter who never visits would look bad. They make a fuss if I don't go, so I endure it and visit twice a year. I went back grudgingly this Thanksgiving, but my mother was as cold as ever. You and your husband are still so unimpressive. It ruins the festive mood. She started with her sarcasm right away. She called us back only to say such things. If she's going to be like this, she shouldn't bother calling. I thought, while fending off her sarcasm, but her barbs continued. We're worried about you. You two live in poverty. We always think you'll come begging for money. My family home is quite wealthy. But since leaving, I've never asked for financial help and have been living off our own earnings with Walt. We manage a decent life and even celebrate their birthdays properly. There's no way we would do that. I immediately responded to her baseless accusation. However, she blurted out, "But you two are still low income, aren't you?" And then shifted her gaze to Walt beside me. "Walt, you're still working at that detective agency, right? How long do you plan to keep doing that shady business? Don't you feel embarrassed?" Indeed, Walt works as a detective, something she always ridicules. She sees detective work as shady and inferior to regular jobs. While Walt was explaining his job to make it understandable for her, Zach chimed in. "Mom, it's pointless to even listen to that. Detective work is shady, something nobody wants to get involved in. It's a low-level job done by people beneath us. The salary must be nothing compared to mine." Flaunting his elitism, Zach looked down on detective work, just like her. That is something we've been hearing since we got married. Walt remained silent, but I felt angry that his job was being completely dismissed. Walt has been my confidant since our student days, so he understands what my family is like. Therefore, he always accompanies me when we have to visit my parents, not wanting to leave me alone. Even though he knows he'll be subjected to unpleasantness, I still feel terribly guilty. This visit, like others, ended up being an unpleasant experience. We resolved to live modestly together, not bothered by my family. Around that time, something wonderful happened. In our 3rd year of marriage, I finally became pregnant. I was overjoyed to be expecting our first child. Considering the way my parents always disparaged me, I felt I couldn't keep my pregnancy a secret from them. So, I visited my family home to announce it. It had been a while since I visited outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie were there. The response to my announcement was unexpected. Upon hearing my news, my mother suddenly raised her voice. "How dare you say such a thing in front of Zach?" I was surprised by her reaction. I hadn't expected congratulations, but this was unexpected. I was puzzled by her reference to Zach, and as I tilted my head in confusion, she revealed a shocking truth. "Zach can't have children, due to Rosie's constitution. How could you be so insensitive with your announcement?" I had no idea that they were infertile. Stunned by her unexpected words, I turned to look at the two. Zach looked uncomfortable and resigned. Meanwhile, Rosie was looking down solemnly. "You dare have a child before Zach? If it weren't for Rosie, this wouldn't have happened." She sighed dramatically, glancing back and forth between Rosie and me. Observing that, Zach intervened. "You know, Rosie feels guilty enough as it is. Don't be too hard on her, Mom." I was a bit surprised to hear he defend Rosie. From my occasional visits, I knew that his attitude towards Rosie was never that kind. "You're really kind, Zach. Rosie, if it weren't for being Zach's wife, you'd have been divorced long ago." Hearing Zach's words, our mother glared at Rosie. Indeed, knowing them, they might have divorced Rosie immediately upon learning of her infertility. But perhaps Zach does have some affection for his wife. I pondered that as I watched he calm our mother down. "Well, I've made my announcement, so I'll be heading home." The atmosphere had turned to blaming Rosie because of my announcement, so I decided to leave quickly. But then, my mother turned to me and said something unbelievable. "The baby you're having, give it to Zach." "What?" I couldn't help but exclaim in shock at her outrageous suggestion. "What does she mean, give my baby to Zach? You can have another child since you're capable of having one. Since Rosie seems unable to. So giving that baby to Zach as an adopted child will bring peace to our family." Peace? What is she talking about? How could they think of taking my baby for him, just because he can't have children? That's absurd and unjustifiable. When I insisted I would never agree to such a thing, my mother retorted, "Look, this is our long-awaited first grandchild. I'll let it grow around me. It's only right that we get to raise it. Zach will take over the company, so we will raise the baby." She made such infuriating arguments, planning to take away my unborn child just to ensure a successor for our father's company. She talked about the process of adoption as if she had researched it, but I was too furious to listen. Seeing how irritated I was, Zach added something unbelievable. "Well, since Rosie can't have children, it's good for her that you got pregnant at this time. At least you're finally contributing to this family." I couldn't believe it, but Zach seemed to agree with her. Even our father, who usually says nothing, nodded in agreement from behind them. It seemed the whole family was ready to claim my baby as their own. I couldn't believe how casually Zach spoke such terrible words to his own wife, acting as if nothing was wrong. Realizing that talking further was pointless, I decided to leave immediately. They only said, "Make sure to give us an answer next time you come," and didn't even come out to see me off. Only Rosie, who must have been deeply hurt, silently saw me off. Even after returning home, my anger didn't subside. Far from celebrating my pregnancy, they made an unreasonable and absurd demand. Thinking about the future made me feel gloomy. They would probably keep pushing for adoption after the baby was born. Walt was also shocked when he heard the story from me after returning from work. Even he was at a loss for words. He understands my family, but the situation being beyond belief. A few days later, we had an unexpected visitor at home. "What brings you here so suddenly? It's rare to see you alone." It was Rosie. She looked haggard, her skin lacked luster, and her hair was disheveled. As she looked at us, her eyes brimmed with tears. "Olivia, I'm so sorry about the other day." She must be referring to when I went to announce my pregnancy. It wasn't her fault though. She seemed to feel guilty about the unreasonable demands made by my family. Then, she began to speak about something unexpected. "Actually, I have something I want to talk to you about." What could it be? I invited her in to hear her out. What she revealed was shocking, and my anger surged again. Trying hard to suppress her anger, she calmly told me a significant truth. Walt had been quietly listening to our conversation, but spoke up as our talk wound down, saying, "Actually, and revealed information to me. It was as astonishing and infuriating as Rosie's confession. Although Rosie had been listening to Walt's story, her teared up again. Having been informed of this significant fact by Walt and Rosie, I made a decision to punish my parents and Zach. I swore to myself to settle past grievances and seek revenge. 3 months later, my belly beginning to show, I visited my family home with Walt. There were my parents, Zach, and Rosie. "You've decided to give the baby to Zach, right?" My mother asked, without even a greeting. It seemed she could only think of my baby being adopted by Zach. "I told you before, that's not going to happen." As I responded, my parents glared at me, as if they couldn't accept it. "No matter what you say, we're taking that baby. Stop being so stubborn." My mother appeared infuriated by my resistance. Feeling the same way, Zach and my father just glared at me without stopping her. "No matter how much you yell, I will never give the baby away. Instead, I came today to show something to you guys. Is that okay, Rosie?" I said, then made eye contact with Rosie. She nodded, still looking into my eyes. "Rosie intends to divorce Zach. And the reason is this." I pulled several photos from an envelope I had brought. That was my purpose for coming today. "These are..." Seeing the photos, Zach was speechless. The photos showed Zach kissing another woman and entering a hotel, undeniable evidence of his infidelity. Apparently shocked to have been photographed, he muttered just one sentence. "Who the hell took these photos?" Our parents, standing next to Zach, looked bewildered and alternated their gaze between him and me. They probably had no idea that he was having an affair. "It was Walt who took these." "What?" Yes, Walt had taken the photos. Walt had been silently watching that unfold, but began to explain how he came to take the photos. As a detective, he had incidentally seen Zach walking in downtown with an unknown woman while investigating a case. Out of curiosity, he conducted his own investigation and discovered that Zach was having an affair with that woman by pretending to be single. The decisive moment was captured in those photos. Zach seemed to think he had cleverly kept his affair secret. He was dumbfounded and at a loss for words. "Adultery is a valid reason for divorce. Make sure you pay Rosie a proper compensation." Amidst the tense atmosphere, Zach spoke. "I got stuck with a wife who's so incompetent. It's okay to have a little fun outside, right?" Rosie and I were speechless. Instead of apologizing, he blamed Rosie for his infidelity. "That's right, you're right. Rosie, it's because you're incompetent. To think you're acting all high and mighty about divorce." Our mother joined in, supporting his retort. They were desperately trying to blame Rosie, probably not wanting to be at a disadvantage themselves. I guess after I left, she must have been treated coldly by this family, just like I was. Thinking about it made me feel terribly sorry for her. Therefore, I decided to confront this family today. To save myself and Rosie, who had been neglected all that time, I pushed them further into a corner by blaming Rosie. "Zach, you made fun of Walt, but the investigative skills of a professional detective are extraordinary. As soon as he started investigating, evidence kept piling up. And then, we found out something shocking about your mistress." Saying that, I saw my parents tensing up, wondering what shocking fact would come out next. "The woman you're having an affair with seems to be the daughter of a mafia boss." As soon as I revealed it, Zach stiffened as if frozen. He must not have known that. Immediately, my mother screamed. "What? Is that true?" Her beloved son's mistress being the daughter of a mafia boss. Upon knowing the full extent of the shocking truth, she collapsed to the ground, covering her face with both hands. My father also pressed his head with both hands, as if he had heard something terrifying. "Zach, you were pretending to be single while dating her, correct?" Right, he had hidden his marital status to have an affair with the woman. If she finds out that she's been deceived by a married man, what do you think will happen? What will her parents do when they learn their daughter was tricked by a married man? It would be better to tell them, right? With my threatening words, now clearly realizing the identity of the woman he had been deceiving, Zach started to panic. "No! I didn't know either. I was deceived too. Our parents, domineering just a moment ago, were now completely confused by this unforeseen revelation. Then, Rosie began to speak in front of the flustered. You didn't just deceive your mistress, did you? With her words, tension returned to the room. Then, she repeated what she had told me during her visit. You are infertile, aren't you? At that moment, Zach's face showed an "oh no" expression. Our parents looked at him in shock. They had blamed Rosie for not being able to have a baby, but the cause was actually Zach himself. Did you know, Rosie? That was all he could manage to say. The stunned parents were visibly shaken by the harsh impact. As they struggled to find their next words, Rosie delivered the final blow. I found it accidentally while cleaning the room. Rosie had stumbled upon his infertility diagnosis, hidden in his desk drawer. He couldn't admit that to his doting parents, so he kept that fact a secret and blamed infertility on Rosie. Believing his words, our parents had blamed Rosie. His protective comments about Rosie when I announced my pregnancy were probably due to his guilt over the issue. Being blamed for not being able to have a baby, I suffered every day. And the talk turned to taking Olivia's child. I was just so sad. Rosie declared that with a calm and unchanged expression. In contrast, my parents had just learned the shocking truth and were in a panic. To think Zach will never have a baby, that's just... My mother was despairing at the reality of not being able to hold his child. But in the next moment, she turned her hysterical hatred towards him. You knew it was your fault, yet you pushed all the blame onto your wife. Did you cheat with other women just because you knew you were infertile? How could my son be so low? Oh dear, why did this happen? She vented her frustration at him. Hearing it, he finally spoke and started his pitiful explanation. I was shocked to find out I was infertile. I felt guilty for not giving you two a grandchild. When I found out Olivia was pregnant with a boy, it just seemed convenient. It was a story that made me feel utterly contemptuous. Shaking off my anger, I delivered the final blow to the three. Your selfish actions hurt Rosie and me. Besides, you have an affair with such a dangerous person. Zach, Mom, and Dad, you all better brace yourselves for what's coming. You guys have hurt so many people, now you'll get what you deserve. Hearing my words, they started apologizing to us, their earlier bravado gone. Where did the momentum go when you asked me to give up my son? I looked at the three of them with disdain, like looking at trash. Beside me, Rosie said nothing and just stared ahead. Her silence spoke volumes about the depth of her sorrow. Zach and my parents were in for tough times ahead. The father of Zach's mistress learned about the affair, and the three of them were summoned and had to apologize repeatedly. Although they managed to break off the affair, Zach was forced to pay a hefty compensation because he had deceived the woman. The amount was staggering, and they learned the hard way the dangers of entanglement with such people. Because of that, my family home soon fell into disarray. My father was forced to resign as company president due to the public scandal. My mother became isolated, seen with disdain by the neighbors, and withdrew into herself. The relationship between my parents became hostile, constantly arguing over Zach. Zach was forced to leave his job after the scandal leaked to his company. As if to add insult to injury, his divorce with Rosie was finalized. Losing his job and having to pay compensation to Rosie, Zach was trapped in a life of relentless work. Around the time Rosie successfully left the family home, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both the baby and I were in good health, and I savored the joy of welcoming a new life. The happy days for our family of three began. Then, Walt and I decided to cut all ties with my family. I had been torn about severing ties with such parents and brother, but that incident made me realize it was best for my son. Even without them, I have an irreplaceable family now. I've decided to cherish only my precious family from now on.
My eldest son and his wife bought a second-hand home. But we don't share personal information with others. That's what she said, not inviting me to their housewarming party, or even telling me their new address. My son is head over heels for her, and does whatever she says. I wanted to celebrate their housewarming. But, well, if you're going to act like that, I'll respond in kind. You moved on the top floor of a luxury apartment building. Classic move. When she heard I moved to the top floor of a high-rise, her attitude changed instantly. I'll make sure she regrets it. I am Tenley, 67 years old. I run a business. I'm also involved in real estate and recently acquired 3 high-rise apartments. Living in a high-rise isn't too bad. I could even consider moving. Since owning the apartments, I've thought about letting go of my spacious house. I have a 33-year-old son. He's independent now, so it's just me at home. That's one reason I'm considering moving.
I want to make my own way,
he declared, choosing not to work at my company. Perhaps he has a bad impression of my business because it once struggled. After college, he joined a major corporation. I don't have a husband. I divorced when my son was in elementary school because of my husband's infidelity. Running a business kept me busy, and juggling work and parenting left no time for my husband. It was a tough time. The situation affected my business, causing trouble for all my employees. I quickly turned things around and the company recovered. Time flew by. Before I knew it, my son was an adult, and I was getting older. To my surprise, he recently told me he's getting married. They were high school classmates and reconnected at a reunion. She's his first girlfriend. He's bringing her over this Saturday. I can't believe my son is getting married. But he's over 30, so it's about time. I'm happy for him. From our conversations, it's clear he's deeply in love with her. Unlike my ex-husband who abandoned his family, my son showers his girlfriend with love. I am relieved. I decided to get along with her, hoping our relationship won't be the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law drama you see on YouTube. On the day of the formal introduction, "Nice to meet you," a lively woman greeted me. "I'm Eleanor, Zachary's girlfriend. Zachary told me you love these treats, so I got them for you this morning. Please enjoy." She handed me my favorite donuts. "Oh, you shouldn't have. Thank you." This donut shop is so popular that there's often a line from the morning. Sometimes they sell out within 2 hours of opening. She got up early just for this. Her makeup and hairstyle were natural yet perfect. I wonder what time she woke up. She's not only beautiful but also considerate and well-mannered. Plus, she's fun to talk to. I can see why my son fell for her. Such a wonderful woman is rare. I believe we'll have a good relationship. I thought to myself, please take care of Zachary. I celebrated their marriage. They had a family introduction and an engagement ceremony, and they both got married without a hitch. I wished them happiness. Then, perhaps sensing my wishes, they told me,
Eleanor is 5 months pregnant now.
I'm going to be a grandmother. Very happy. I was overjoyed, even more than when my son got married. I believed everyone would be happy, and that even better days were ahead. Then, one day, "Mother-in-law, I'm here again." Eleanor seemed fond of me and often visited. "It's good to see you. Come on in." I was glad we weren't at odds. But to be honest, her frequent unannounced visits were becoming a bother. On top of that, "Look at this! Isn't it super cute? Mother-in-law, I really want this for the baby. Don't you think it'll look adorable?" She'd show me baby items and subtly hint she wanted them. "Oh, it's lovely. Would you like me to get it for you?" Even though our relationship was still new, she was the woman my son chose. And it was for my first grandchild. I kept indulging her requests. "Thank you so much." I thought this would help build a good relationship. But, "Mother-in-law, look! I want this next. Cute, right? Can I order it?" She even started sending emails like, "Mother-in-law, I want the item in this URL. Order it for me. Oh, and have it delivered tomorrow morning." She began to take my generosity for granted and stopped expressing gratitude. At first, it was endearing, but I couldn't believe her audacity. I finally said, "Don't you think you're taking advantage of me? You need to show some manners. At least say thank you." But then, "What? I don't expect anything. But you run a company and own 3 luxury apartments, right? Is what I'm asking for more expensive than those apartments?" She seemed to think I was wealthy and could easily afford her requests. "Even so, shouldn't you buy things yourself to truly value them? Especially since you're about to become a mother. You should teach your child to say thank you." She became irritated. "By the way, Zachary mentioned your company once struggled. Is it struggling again? Is that why you won't buy me things? You've asked for expensive items, like the entire dress set for the baby celebration, which costs over $10,000. That's not a simple request. My company is doing fine now." "So what? If your company is doing well, you have extra money, right? Zachary is a department head at a major corporation, but there's a big difference between his income and yours. I want a better life. If you won't spend money on me, I don't see the point of marrying Zachary." It sounded like she married him for his money. "Wait, didn't you marry Zachary because you love him?" "Of course not." I remembered he was the heir to a CEO at the reunion and approached him. He fell for me instantly. So easy. I wouldn't care about him if he didn't have money. That's terrible. Zachary would be devastated if he heard this. I won't tell you to divorce, especially with the child on the way. But I won't tolerate you hurting Zachary. He truly loves you. Don't trample on his feelings." She couldn't retort and suddenly stood up. "Fine. If you won't give me money, you're no different from a stranger. I don't care." She left in anger. I never imagined my daughter-in-law would turn out to be such a person. I debated whether to tell my son about this. But that very night,
"Mom, what's going on?"
my son stormed into the house yelling. I just pointed out that Eleanor's behavior was too presumptuous, and she never even says thank you. Before I could finish, my son shouted back,
"If Eleanor says you have money, then you do. She's pregnant, for God's sake. You're the worst mother-in-law for being so cold to her. She's been crying ever since she got home."
I wondered if I was in the wrong. but it was clear who was being unreasonable. I knew Eleanor was using my son for his money. I hesitated but told him the truth for his sake. However,
That's impossible. Eleanor isn't like that. She's pure, like an angel. She's a goddess. She tells me every day how much she loves me. I know she loves me.
it was too late. No matter how much I tried to reason with him, he wouldn't listen. It was as if he was brainwashed by her. After hours of going in circles, he said,
I never thought you'd be such a stubborn and mean mother-in-law.
I felt the same about him. He was loyal, which was good, but he was so blinded by her that he couldn't see anything else.
I'll keep my distance from now on. I won't come back here.
He left after saying that. We had argued a few times during his teenage years, but this was the worst. I regretted confronting Eleanor. Even though she's terrible, maybe I shouldn't have opposed her. Eleanor stopped visiting and my son wouldn't answer my calls. I wonder if I'll ever get to see my grandchild. There were only 3 months left until the birth. I was anxious, and my fears came true in an unexpected way. 2.5 months after our fight,
Eleanor gave birth. No, I mean, Eleanor gave birth to a girl. A cute girl.
my son called. I could hear the excitement in his voice. Can I come to the hospital? He said it was okay. I couldn't believe I'd get to meet my grandchild. Maybe time had healed our relationship. Either way, I was overjoyed. Not just because of the birth, but also because I could reconnect with my son and his wife. I left work and rushed to the hospital. It was designed like a hotel, and it looked just like one from the outside. I ran into Zachary and Eleanor in the hallway as they were moving from the delivery room to the ward. It was a bit awkward and I wasn't sure what to say. Congratulations to both of you. They thanked me. We entered the room. At Eleanor's request, it wasn't a shared room but a private suite. Eleanor's parents had also arrived.
She's a bit early, but I'm glad she's healthy,
said Eleanor's mother. As we tried to make small talk, Eleanor's mother made a strange comment.
The next one's a fixer-upper, right? I can't wait to see it after the renovation. It'll be fun for us too.
Huh? A fixer-upper? What are they talking about? Then Eleanor said, I'm really thirsty. Can you and Dad go get me a drink? She tried to get her parents out of the room.
Just gave birth, huh? Okay, we'll get a bunch.
With that, her parents left. What did your mother mean by fixer-upper? When I asked, Eleanor and my son exchanged glances.
Mom, I told you we'd keep our distance,
Zachary said coldly. It seemed they were still upset about that day.
We're renovating a multi-generational home without telling you. It's not ready yet.
Oh, and don't get it wrong. Only our parents and us will live there. Even though we were celebrating a new life, I was shocked. Why did you invite me today? If you kept the house a secret, you could have kept the baby's birth a secret too. I came here hoping to reconcile. I don't understand why I was invited.
Obviously, for the baby shower gifts. Oh, and can you cover the hospital bill? It's twice as expensive as other places. That's nothing for you, right?
Yeah, and I'd like compensation for the hurt you caused me.
Right, Eleanor. I wanted to ask for money right away, but we ran into you in the hallway. Huh. Couldn't say it in front of the nurses and her parents.
Eleanor continued. By the way, we're having a housewarming party just for our family. You're not invited. My parents don't really want to talk to the mother-in-law either. Huh?
They said something about not liking you because you're a CEO. Poor thing.
They were treating me like a cash cow and not even inviting me to the housewarming party. And her parents were just as bad. Why are you telling me all this? Today's a wonderful day because of the baby's birth, right? Eleanor laughed. Zachary said we'd keep our distance, but we showed you the baby and now it's goodbye. If you pay for various expenses, we don't care. Basically, you're a stranger to us. We don't share personal information with strangers. I was treated like a stranger. It was cruel. Too cruel. If you really want an invite to the housewarming party, cover the baby shower, birth expenses, and future child care costs. If you liquidate 2 high-rise condos, you can easily cover the costs until the child grows up. It'll be a breeze for you, right?
That's right. Eleanor's so smart. Give us money for Eleanor and the baby. That's the only way to keep us connected.
My son had changed so much because of one woman, and the woman who poisoned him. I couldn't forgive them. You called me a stranger earlier, right? Fine, from now on we're strangers. With that, I left the room. I faintly heard them laughing, but I didn't care. After all, they're strangers. Strangers, huh? Giving birth is life-threatening, and raising a child is even harder. I struggled to raise my son. I called him a stranger, but of course I didn't mean it. I wanted to be a family forever. On my way back to the office, I cried in my car. But I'm a CEO. I switched to work mode. I immersed myself in work for a while, not wanting to think about today. A few months later, thanks to my efforts, our performance improved, and we achieved our highest sales ever. I have a lot more money now. Maybe I should make a big purchase. And so, as a way to relieve recent stress and reward myself for my hard work, I purchased a corner unit on the top floor of a high-rise condominium. The view is spectacular and the place is very comfortable. Then, one day, my phone rang. It was a call from Eleanor. After calling me a stranger, what could she possibly want now? I ignored it, but the phone kept ringing. Reluctantly, I answered. It's been a while. I heard you're living on the top floor of a high-rise condo. Why didn't you tell me? Apparently, she had heard about my new place. Come to think of it, there was quite a buzz in the neighborhood when I moved. Typical of you, living on the top floor of a high-rise. You're truly the pride of our family. Her overly sweet praise sent shivers down my spine. What do you want? When I asked, Eleanor began to say something unbelievable. Actually, can you lend us some money? She's asking for money after all this time. What is she thinking? Why? I asked for a reason. She hesitated. I'm hanging up. This is a waste of time. Just as I said that, Eleanor spoke up. Wait! The thing is, Zachary got demoted. Zachary was demoted? What on earth happened? Well, where to start? Eleanor slowly explained. Apparently, Zachary had been very rude to a major client. Furthermore, this incident made him anxious about making more mistakes, leading him to make several errors at work. He was soon to be demoted. Fortunately, he could still commute from home, but his salary was significantly reduced. On top of that, his bonus for this period was cut. We paid a large down payment, and now we have no savings. They had paid a significant amount from their savings as a down payment, hoping to pay off the loan quickly. But they still had a lot of debt. I never thought this would happen. Eleanor continued, saying she had stayed in a loveless marriage with Zachary because of his stable income. She believed she could live comfortably with her parents without working. Such naive thinking. With the loan payments, living expenses, insurance, property tax starting next year, and considerable daily diaper expenses, Zachary's family was struggling. Eleanor's father was the guarantor, but when she discussed this with him, he said,
We just signed our names. We can't help with money. We have our own retirement to think about. That's right. We sold our house and moved here because you said you found a good catch. This isn't the wealthy marriage you promised. You need to take responsibility for our retirement.
They not only refused to help, but also pressured her to work more. That's why I'm asking you.
Why are you asking me? Shouldn't Zachary be the one to ask?
Actually, Zachary told me not to consult with you. After pushing you away like that, he feels he can't show weakness.
Indeed, that's true. Zachary made a foolish mistake, but this choice is right. Is he finally seeing things clearly?
Please help me. I started a part-time job, but I've had to take many days off because our child keeps getting sick. I'm earning so little. We can't go on like this.
Eleanor pleaded, but I quickly responded. Aren't we strangers?
What?
I might be petty for holding on to the fact that she called me a stranger, but the truth is, it hurt deeply.
My son is suffering. Don't you care? And you promised to cover the hospital bills when I gave birth, but you didn't. We were billed a huge amount when I was discharged. It was so embarrassing.
Eleanor desperately tried to make her case. I never promised to pay. I'm truly sorry for your situation. Eleanor broke down.
You're living luxuriously in a high-rise condo, and you're the CEO, right? You own the whole building, so give me one of the rooms.
Her anger was palpable, and her child started crying in the background. Why should I give a room to a stranger like you? I stood my ground.
Why? It was just a joke when I called you a stranger.
A joke? So it's okay to treat me like a stranger as a joke. Can't you see how much that hurt me? Eleanor fell silent. Only the child's crying could be heard.
Please, at least help our child, please.
It's true. The child is innocent. It's heartbreaking to see them caught up like this. When the child gets sick, they call you to pick them up, right? Can't you rely on your parents? She hesitated before answering.
My parents. They say the child is too noisy and doesn't listen, so they don't want to take care of them. They also say the child's colds are strong and they might catch it and die. It's no surprise considering who her parents are. Most likely, Eleanor's parents were relying on Zachary's income to support them. I understand. I'll help with the child.
Really?
We agreed that I would only take care of the child when they were sick. The child is innocent, but I won't help you. So find a way to earn money on your own.
But that doesn't solve anything.
I hung up. The next morning, Zachary called, apologizing profusely. He apologized many times. It seems that his wife called me last night and got into a fight.
You told me not to involve Mom.
Shut up! If you weren't a CEO's son, I wouldn't have married you. I thought I'd be envied by my friends for marrying into wealth.
What Mom told me, it was true.
He sounded full of regret. Despite the harsh words, Zachary still had feelings for Eleanor and didn't want a divorce.
I am such an idiot.
He regretted many things. After discussing the situation, we decided that I would pick up the child when needed.
I am so sorry for all the trouble.
Hearing Zachary's sincere apology eased some of my resentment. Zachary started working a part-time job in addition to his day job. It seemed tough for him, both physically and mentally. Eleanor began working full-time. Her salary increased, but life was still hard, especially with her elderly parents to care for. They had to work 3 to 4 times harder than others. Eleanor often fell ill from overwork and was recently hospitalized for anemia. They moved to a larger apartment that matched their income. As for me, I adore my 2-year-old grandchild. The child is very attached to me and is quite the grandma's child. This is exclusive to me, of course. The child is scared of Eleanor's parents and cries when they see them. Moreover, when Eleanor and Zachary come to pick up the child, they don't want to leave my side. Unlike Zachary, it seems the child knows how to judge people. These days, I think, this is my little revenge. But I'll keep that thought to myself.
No one else will be involved from now on. Richard, the fiancé of my eldest daughter Linda, declares this with a smug smile. What? What are you talking about? I raise my voice in surprise, not expecting Richard's remark. Well, Linda told me. You're not her mom, right? You're just an outsider, aren't you? As I stand there in shock, my second daughter Olivia slams the table and stands up. Enough is enough. What's wrong with you? Dad, how can you approve Linda's marriage to this rude man? Olivia's face turns red as she fires off these words. Before I can get angry, my daughter is already outraged, and my husband Joseph responds with a troubled look. Olivia, calm down. You shouldn't say anything more. I hug the agitated Olivia and glare at Richard. Understood. Richard responds with the same smug smile to my words. Linda, lucky you. This outsider won't interfere with us anymore. A dinner that was supposed to be enjoyable is now chaotic because of Richard. Olivia, who was looking forward to a rare family gathering, finally breaks down crying. Yet, neither Linda nor Richard seem to care. I won't have anything to do with people who hurt Olivia like this anymore. Even if Linda defies me, she's still my daughter. I don't want to upset Linda, but I can't forgive the two who made Olivia feel this way. if they treat me like an outsider, I have my own thoughts. Linda and Richard couldn't have imagined that at this moment. They would lose everything. My name is Mary, 48 years old. I work as an office clerk at a friend's company. Privately, I currently live with my husband and 2 daughters, 4 of us in total. My husband Joseph is 1 year younger than me, 47, and he had a previous wife before marrying me. The 2 daughters are not my biological children, but born to my husband and his ex-wife. My eldest daughter, Linda, is 28 this year, and the youngest, Olivia, is 25. When Joseph and I got married, both officially became my daughters. When I first met them, they were both in elementary school. Having separated from their mother at a young age, the girls and I, all women, quickly became close. I heard from Joseph that their mother repeatedly cheated after getting married. Even after Olivia was born, his ex-wife's bad habits didn't improve, and Joseph, troubled, ended up divorcing her. Joseph was busy working to support the 2 of them, managing only the bare minimum in parenting. Their meals often consisted of frozen foods and noodles, so I made an effort to cook homemade meals. I also bought them girlish clothes and visited them as often as I could. During that time, Joseph and I decided to get married. My parents were against it from the start of our relationship. I knew the difficulties of marrying a man with children, but I pushed through my parents' opposition and left home to be with Joseph. At first, I was just happy to spend time with all 4 of us, and I didn't mind the hardships. But as we got used to each other, I began to understand why my parents were against this marriage. The girls, who used to see me as an older sister, couldn't accept me suddenly becoming their mother. They didn't take me seriously, and when Joseph wasn't around, they did as they pleased. When I got too angry at them, Joseph didn't like it and blamed me. "You're just bothered by them because they're not your real children, right?" I was deeply hurt by his words, which he said almost every day. Each time, the fact that Linda and Olivia were not my biological daughters weighed heavily on me. There were times when my relationship with Joseph soured over how I interacted with the girls, but we never reached an irreparable rift. Meanwhile, my relationship with the daughters became more and more troubled. Olivia, who was lively as a child, started to support me as she grew up. She often helped with the housework voluntarily and began to treat me more like a mother. However, Linda, the elder one, grew to dislike me more and more as she matured. It might have been her age, but it seemed she didn't accept me as her mother. Joseph would only say it was unavoidable, and never scolded Linda for her defiance. Since Joseph didn't firmly reprimand Linda, she didn't think her behavior was wrong. Olivia often tried to intervene, but Linda's attitude towards me never improved. In high school, Linda began to openly attack me. "Can you stop ordering me around, you outsider? What's your intention? It's annoying." When I took them in as my daughters, I was prepared for some challenges, but at this rate, Linda will never see me as her mother. "Hey, isn't that too much? If you don't say something, we'll be stuck like this forever." I felt this was a serious issue and consulted Joseph each time, but he always sided with Linda. "It's natural she doesn't accept you. You're not her real mother. Can't you understand that?" By this time, Joseph had also started to openly attack me. I understand a parent's love, but isn't it a parent's duty to discipline when necessary? As I feared, Joseph's leniency only worsened Linda's behavior. She stopped attending high school seriously and often didn't come home. Even when Olivia managed to contact her, Linda brushed her off, saying she was with her boyfriend. I couldn't allow a high school girl to stay at a man's house. Even when Olivia handed the phone to me, Linda wouldn't listen. I hesitated to tell Joseph, knowing it would shock him, but I had no choice. However, Joseph's anger, now openly hostile towards me, was directed at me. It's your fault Linda ended up like this. Joseph was distraught, but Olivia's stern rebuke stopped his attack on me. Dad, enough! Mom warned us many times and you never said anything. Perhaps Joseph realized his part in this. Chastised by Olivia, he pounded the table, his anger having nowhere else to go. After that, Joseph kept deceiving himself, pretending not to see Linda's behavior. Unable to do anything, Linda eventually dropped out of high school. After dropping out, Linda barely came home, and even Joseph didn't know what she was doing. The family was falling apart, but thanks to Olivia, Joseph and I stayed together. Time passed, and one day, when Olivia turned 25, she said, Mom, it seems Linda is getting married, Olivia muttered when she got back from work. Linda, who hadn't been coming home much since that time, was regularly checked on by Olivia for her well-being. Linda, who had rarely come home since then, always had a boyfriend despite not working after dropping out. Now, she was finally getting married. Despite being estranged, I was happy to hear this family celebration news. Joseph heard about Linda's marriage, and for the first time in a while, the three of us laughed together. Even Linda contacted us, wanting to talk in person with her fiancé. Olivia seemed the most relieved by this news. She hoped that improving her relationship with Linda would also mend mine and Joseph's. There had been many issues, but we might be able to laugh together as a family of four, like when we first met. A faint hope filled my heart. A few days later, as promised, Linda came home. It had been about a year since she last visited, so it was a rare occasion for the whole family to be together. Beside Linda stood her fiancé, Richard, in a suit. Nice to meet you. I'm Richard, Linda's boyfriend. Richard seemed serious but avoided making eye contact with me, speaking only to Joseph and Olivia. Linda hasn't been home much. I'm sorry for any worries caused. Richard had been dating Linda for about 2 years, but we'd hardly seen each other in that time. Both Linda and Richard acted as if I were invisible, following Joseph into the living room. Noticing their behavior, Olivia frowned and looked at me. Mom. Olivia seemed to want to say more, but I stopped her, taking her hand and following the others. We sat across from Linda and Richard with the table between us. Surrounded by fancy sweets prepared for today, the conversation began. Dad? Olivia? It's been a while. Linda was deliberately ignoring me. Linda, have you been ignoring Mom since you got here? Olivia was getting irritated with Linda's attitude. Eh? Oh, you're here. Linda laughed mockingly, and Richard joined in. Olivia looked like she wanted to say more, but I stopped her. Olivia? It's fine. Olivia's mouth formed the words, but. Let's focus on why we're here today. To introduce Richard. As if our exchange hadn't happened, Linda turned to look at Richard next to her. Prompted by Linda, Richard straightened up and began to speak. I will marry Linda and make her happy. Please accept my regards. Richard spoke formally, looking at Joseph. This is my daughter. Please take care of her. Joseph's words made Linda and Richard hold hands and smile. There's something we want to say. Linda prompted Richard. No outsiders will be involved from now on. Richard looked straight at me and declared this with a smug smile. What? What are you talking about?" His unexpected words left me in shock. Even as a joke, this was beyond mischief. "Well, Linda told me you're not a real mom, right? Just an outsider?" Richard seemed to enjoy my reaction. I thought our fractured family relationship was mending, but that hope was cruelly shattered. Speechless, I could only compare Linda and Richard's faces. Seeing this, Olivia slammed the table and stood up. "Enough! What's wrong with you, Dad? Can you really approve Linda's marriage to this rude person?" Olivia's face turned red as she lashed out. Before I could get angry, my daughter Olivia expressed her indignation, and Joseph responded with a troubled look. "Olivia, calm down. Don't say anything more." This was the first time Olivia, who had always been on my side, was reprimanded by Joseph. I hugged an agitated Olivia and glared at Richard. "Understood." The three of them exchanged looks at my words. I won't have anything to do with people who hurt Olivia anymore. As I declared this, Joseph looked a bit troubled, but Richard and Linda started laughing. "We didn't hurt Olivia, but okay. Anyway, you're not invited to the wedding." Linda's words were followed by Richard's nod. "It's unthinkable to invite irrelevant outsiders to such a special day." Richard said this and began eating the sweets on the table. "Mom, it's okay. I don't want to see these people anymore," Olivia muttered, her eyes tearing up. Olivia is dear to Joseph, just like Linda. "Olivia, don't say that." Joseph, disturbed by her tears, stood up but was stopped by Linda. "Dad, leave it. Let it go." Joseph, offered a drink by Richard, hesitantly took the glass. I spoke to Olivia and left the living room. Overwhelmed by shock, Olivia continued to sob. We could hear their laughter from the living room, but Olivia and I quickly left the house. I took Olivia to my parents' home, where they had been quietly watching over us since I married Joseph. I felt guilty for turning to them only when in need, but they were our only refuge. I'm sorry for coming only when convenient. My parents were surprised to see us, but welcomed us with smiles. Seeing Olivia's tears, my mother seemed deeply pained. After explaining everything in the living room, my parents advised us to stay for a while. Olivia wished to stay, so we gratefully accepted their kindness. I sent a brief message to Joseph, assuring him of Olivia's safety, after receiving several calls. Although Joseph scolded Olivia at the time, he seemed worried about his daughter. Olivia, feeling betrayed by Joseph's siding with Richard and Linda, refused to forgive him. "I don't want to talk to Dad," she said, indicating no intention of returning home. While Joseph was at work, Olivia and I packed our belongings and moved them out. Though not intending to divorce, we decided to live apart for a while. Joseph didn't apologize directly, but seemed remorseful about his attitude towards Olivia. However, he had no intention of blaming Linda or Richard. As time passed, the date for Linda and Richard's wedding was set. Despite reluctance, Olivia agreed to attend the wedding after Linda and Joseph's persistent requests. "Mom, I don't want to go." Olivia was reluctant until the last moment, but I persuaded her. "They say they won't involve outsiders anymore, right? I want you to see what that really means." I told her this meaningfully, and she reluctantly agreed. "I'll go, but I will never forgive Linda and that Richard." Olivia, dressed in a suit, left for the ceremony. When Olivia arrived at the venue, Joseph was waiting at the entrance. "Olivia!" He was relieved to see her after so long, but Olivia's feelings hadn't changed. After a brief exchange, she was led to the reception hall. "What's this? Am I early?" Entering the venue, Olivia couldn't help but exclaim. She had arrived just before the ceremony to avoid talking to Linda and Richard. Checking her watch against the invitation, she was right on time, 5 minutes before the start. Yet, the venue was sparsely populated. A few relatives and friends of Linda were seated on the bride's side, but the groom's side, which should have been filled with Richard's colleagues and friends, was almost empty. Only Richard's parents and a few friends seemed to be present. As Olivia stood puzzled, Richard's angry voice could be heard. "What's going on here?" She turned to see Richard in a tuxedo, shouting at the reception desk. "Why aren't my guests here? Was there a mistake in the invitations?" He was berating a friend at the reception, but the invitations were correct. Linda, worriedly peeking from a room, was also visible. The scheduled time passed and the hall grew increasingly restless. Confused, Olivia had a sudden realization. Could it be Mom did something? I chose that moment of panic to appear at the venue. "What are you doing here?" Linda, who was making frantic calls with Richard, noticed me. Olivia, hearing Linda shout, ran to me. "Mom, what's happening? Why are you here and where are all the guests?" Olivia, full of questions, asked me why I was at the venue uninvited and why none of the guests had shown up. "Did you do something?" Richard, noticing our exchange, approached angrily. "Stay away. Since you said you didn't want anything to do with outsiders, I informed your colleagues not to come." I snapped back, stopping Richard in his tracks, his anger still evident. "What are you talking about? I meant I don't want to deal with you, an outsider," Richard shouted, disheveled, but his outburst couldn't change the situation. Would the name Henry Williams explain the situation? At that, Richard's face showed a flicker of recognition. I confirmed his reaction and continued. "My brother's name is Henry Williams." When I mentioned my brother's name, I could see Richard's face twist in fear. "What are you saying? Henry Williams, isn't that the name of our company's president?" Indeed, it might seem too coincidental, but Richard was an employee at the company my brother Henry managed. Previously, at a family meeting, Richard boasted about being an elite, revealing he worked for the large trading company my brother ran. Initially surprised, I knew Richard had no idea of my connection to Henry. However, when Richard declared he would no longer associate with me, I decided on my plan. After leaving home with Olivia, I discussed everything with my parents and confided in Henry. Henry was surprised, mentioning Richard wasn't the elite he claimed to be and had little recognition in the company. Further inquiries by Henry revealed that Richard was only thought to be competent because of his more capable colleagues. Unaware of his poor reputation, Richard confidently invited many company associates to his wedding. Henry, angered by Richard's behavior towards me and Olivia, but remembering Richard's wish to invite many from the company, I asked Henry to delay the dismissal for revenge. This would shatter Richard's pride and embarrass him in front of Linda. Henry agreed to my plan, ensuring Richard would have no future involvement with our family. Richard and Linda were speechless upon learning everything. Joseph knew about Henry's business, but was incredulous to discover it was Richard's company. "You did this to embarrass me on purpose." Richard glared at me, pale-faced. "This is all your own doing. Looking down on others and hurting them, and now you play the victim?" I raised my voice at Richard's self-victimizing tone. I hadn't wanted to do this. Neither my brother nor Olivia wanted to ruin Linda's future. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thought about it. "Mom." Olivia gently placed her hand on my shoulder, sharing my distress. "Mary, leave the rest to me." I turned at the unexpected voice to see Henry. "Mr. President." Henry glanced at Richard, then spoke to Linda. Do you remember me? You might think of me as a stranger, but Mary and I have always cared about you." My brother continued sadly. "Richard may have said those words, but you also have a responsibility. As an adult, you must face that responsibility." Linda, in her wedding dress, bowed her head. "Richard, you will have to leave the company. Being a company-initiated resignation, you will struggle in your job search due to this fact." Richard would have to explain this resignation in future interviews, a sin he would carry forever. And for Richard, proud as he was, being fired seemed like an unbearable shame. "It's a lie. An elite like me getting fired? It's a lie." Richard repeated the words as if broken. "Richard? Richard!" Linda tried to shake Richard awake, but he collapsed, powerless. Joseph watched silently, neither complaining to me nor attacking me. The venue descended into panic, and the wedding became impossible. I apologized to Richard's parents and friends, explaining everything. I thought Richard's parents would blame my brother and me, but instead, they were furious with their son's actions and apologized to me and Olivia repeatedly. Desperately, they were pleading about something while Richard was in a state of semi-hysteria. We decided to cancel the wedding in consultation with Richard's parents and Joseph. Throughout the chaos, Richard never regained his sanity. Days after the wedding, Olivia and I were still at my parents' house. Olivia had no intention of living with Joseph or Linda again. I considered divorcing Joseph, but I wondered if that would really be the best thing for Olivia. I thought about it for a long time, but couldn't find an answer. Eventually, I realized that Joseph and I would likely not reunite. Olivia and I thought about renting an apartment, but my parents persuaded us to stay with them. Since we had the chance to be together again, we might as well stay here, I thought. I accepted my parents' generous offer to continue living with them. Meanwhile, Richard became mentally ill and stayed home. His pride, once unshakable, was shattered by his dismissal. Richard's parents never blamed me and apologized repeatedly for his behavior. He had betrayed his own parents by looking down on me. Linda left Richard and moved back with Joseph. She had grown weary of Richard's weakness and loss of everything. Linda, though not as devastated as Richard, was still shocked enough to return home after a long absence. She repeatedly contacted me to apologize, but I wasn't ready to accept it yet. I want Linda to fully understand the pain her actions have caused me over the years. This isn't something that can be easily resolved. To make her understand, I've been deliberately strict and have not been speaking to Linda. Olivia agrees with my feelings and also hasn't accepted Linda's apologies. Everyone makes mistakes, but not all can be undone. Despite Linda's reasons, I want her to deeply consider the hurt she caused to me and Olivia when we extended our hands to help. It's been several months since Olivia and I started our new life. There has been no progress in my relationship with Joseph. Olivia hasn't said much, but it seems she is also avoiding Joseph. Joseph appears to be deeply shocked by this situation, but he seems to be reflecting on his actions. Linda, since then, has been desperately job hunting and has started working. Having dropped out of high school, she is struggling due to her lack of work experience. Olivia seems somewhat relieved to hear about her sister's efforts. Reflecting on it, Olivia has always been on my side. She chose to leave Joseph and Linda, blood relatives, to be with me. I felt their value when we were living as a family of 4, but now I realize it even more. Olivia has grown close to my parents and often helps them. Seeing my parents' smiles, which I hadn't seen in a long time, makes me happy. Although I can no longer live with Joseph or Linda, I am satisfied with our new life. I vow to always cherish Olivia, who has always supported me and my parents, who warmly welcomed us.
I've decided to have Mom move in and live with us. My husband's sudden declaration about living together almost made me drop my cup. What? You can't just spring that on me out of nowhere. We can't do that here. Mom's been really down since she became alone suddenly, so I thought it'd be good for her to stay with us for a while. She'll be moving in next week. I was, of course, concerned about my mother-in-law, Sophia, who had suddenly lost her husband in a car accident. But why would he decide on something as big as living together without discussing it with me? I was upset by the suddenness of it all, but tried to convince myself that it was okay for just a short time. However, to my astonishment, Sophia arrived the next week with movers in tow. Sophia, what's all this stuff? What's going on? I figured I'd be more comfortable here than at home, so I thought I might as well sell my house and move here. What? Looking at my husband, I saw him grinning at me. I told you I was bringing Mom to live here, right? This is my house. You need to follow my orders and take care of Mom properly. What? Your orders? What are you talking about? This is the house I'm renting from Scarlett, remember? Had my husband forgotten something that important? I know that, but right now I'm the one paying the high rent here. If you can't listen to what I say, then you can leave the house. What? He's only paying half of the $3,000 rent, though. I could have argued there, but instead I decided to let them face reality. Holding back my retort, I began to pack my bags. This is not going to work. Leaving the high-rise apartment, I sighed heavily and made a phone call. I am Aurora, 35 years old. I've been running my own facial aesthetic salon for 7 years now. I went to vocational school to become a beautician, but during my studies, my focus shifted. Believing that true beauty lies in natural skin, I opened my shop after years of training in a salon. My husband William and I have been married for 3 years. We were high school classmates and reconnected at our 10-year reunion. One day, while discussing natural stone bracelets that were popular back then with my friends, my husband chimed in. If you want to boost your love luck, maybe Inca Rose would be better. Why? And how do you know about this? Oh, I had a phase where I researched natural stones. I mean, we're in our late 20s. Seemed like a good idea for meeting someone special. I was intrigued by him, bedhead hair and all. He had always been known as the guy with the funny bedhead in school. Despite his indifference to appearance and rumors, I never realized he was such an intellectual. Later at the after party, I found out he was also into my favorite anime and shared lots of rare insights. From then on, I was the one who initiated contact, and eventually, we started dating. Today marks our 2nd year together, but I want to be with you next year too. So let's get married. Is this a proposal? Yeah, what else would it be? Well, it's just so sudden. He was a strange guy, but to me, he was interesting and comfortable to be around. I had no reason to say no. 2 years into our marriage, an opportunity, or rather, a great chance came my way. It was an incredible offer from my beloved cousin Scarlett, who is 10 years older than me. We've been close like sisters since we didn't have siblings of our own. Scarlett's proposal was wonderful, but maybe it was too much of a shock for my husband, or me. Little did I know that this would lead to such an outcome. Next month, my husband has to go overseas for work for 2 years. Aurora, how about you live in my high-rise condo during that time? What? No way! I could never afford the rent for a place like that. Mark, Scarlett's husband, has been a successful entrepreneur since his youth, and to be honest, he's wealthier than I could ever imagine. Scarlett also became independent as a management consultant a few years ago, and her profits have been steadily increasing. Aurora, didn't you say before that you couldn't exceed a monthly income of $5,000? Why not try living like a celebrity for once? If you get used to that environment, it might solve your current problems in one fell swoop. I see. Changing my perception of money, right? That's the idea. Our current rent is $15,000, but if you live with us, it's just $3,000. What do you think? I felt dizzy. Even the $900 I currently pay for rent feels expensive. In fact, I really like our current high-rise apartment and don't want to give it up. But Mark said he's okay lending it to you, Aurora. Think of it as an investment. The high-rise apartment where Scarlett lives is owned by Mark's friend Thomas. Thomas, who supports entrepreneurs, immediately agreed when Scarlett mentioned me. I understand it's a good offer, but can I consult with William and get back to you? Of course. I'll be waiting expectantly. At this time, I had been running my salon for 5 years, but no matter how hard I had tried, there were limits to what I could do alone. I had almost given up on ever making more than $5,000 a month. That's why, even before responding, the amount was already pressuring me. When I returned home with heavy steps, my husband was in the middle of his newfound passion for muscle training. I cautiously brought up Scarlett's offer. Why not? The room would be bigger, and it's very close to your workplace. My husband works as an in-house designer for a company, preferring to spend time only on his interests. Commuting from Scarlett's high-rise would significantly reduce his travel time. But it'll be a bigger financial burden than before, right? It's for your growth, right? I'm fine with either decision, so just decide with Scarlett. Even after marriage, my husband showed little interest in anything beyond his hobbies. Probably he was only concerned about the shorter commute in this situation. Even when I explained the terms of living there and the rent, he just nodded, leaving me unsure if he was really listening. After much deliberation, I decided to pay half of the rent, $1.5K, with my husband covering the other half, and I would take care of all other living expenses. I decided to take a gamble on my life for the next 2 years. Wow, amazing. These were our first words when we set foot in the luxurious rental property. I thought I could live in the shoe closet next to the entrance, and the living room, over 40 tatami mats in size, seemed perfect for a grand party. In the spacious room, the striking feature was a pure white leather sofa. Feel free to use everything, we were told. The furniture and appliances, types I had never dreamed of owning, made it hard for me to feel at home. For us, who had never even stayed at a hotel suite, this was a dreamlike, humbling experience. Now I understand what Scarlett meant. Getting used to this environment might indeed change my perspective. Yes, it certainly might. And so our life in a luxury apartment began. Familiarity is a frightening thing. Within 3 months, the initially tense-feeling house started to feel comforting. My approach to work also changed significantly. Having moved here, I wondered if I could use this location to do something new. I'm thinking of hiring someone for my salon, maybe even start offering workshops during my free time. That's what you've been requested before, right? If you want to try it, go for it. I run a beauty-related social media account individually, and had been receiving requests for direct workshops. From then on, every day was a mix of learning and practical application. It was exhausting, but the results were well received, and before I knew it, I was easily surpassing my $5,000 monthly income goal. I had changed, but this environment had also had a significant impact on my husband. His appearance, for one, had transformed. Apparently, he didn't want to inconvenience our neighbors with his usual careless look. He now took care to fix his bed hair and dress neatly before going out. But as a result, our house became messier. People at work who never spoke to me before are starting to talk to me. I bet. You look the best you ever have right now. In the year since we moved, our lives were truly going smoothly. Dark clouds overshadowed our happiness when Sophia, who learned of our new address, came to visit. Sophia enjoys taking lessons as a hobby and is a luxury-loving, show-off personality. I was surprised by the address, but what a wonderful house! I never imagined William would move into such a place. Mom must be so proud. Just like us, Sophia was also surprised. No, Sophia, this house is... That's right, isn't it? When I decide to do something, I do it right. My husband cut off my words, smirking as if he was the one who had rented the place, and then gestured for silence with his finger to his lips. The class I attend is close to here. It'll be easy to drop by, so I'll be visiting more often. Okay. Just make sure to contact us before coming. Of course, I understand. I had a bad feeling about this. After retirement, father-in-law enjoyed fishing with friends and often traveled far. As a result, Sophia's overnight visits increased when father-in-law was away. What bothered me was Sophia sleeping on the white sofa in the living room. No matter how many times I asked her not to, even if I laid out a futon on the floor, she would end up sleeping on the sofa. Sophia, please stop sleeping on the white sofa. This is a rented place. Oh, I'm sorry. I just find myself sleeping here without realizing it. Initially, Sophia behaved like a guest, but gradually, she started acting as if it was her own house. She was careless with the furniture and appliances, making me worry that she would damage something. Hey, isn't Sophia coming over too often? This isn't our house. She should show some restraint. Come on, let Mom enjoy it too. It's not often you get to live like this. Besides, she's helping with cleaning every time she comes, right? It seemed my husband had not corrected his lie to Sophia. He had become neat in his appearance, but was utterly careless at home. Sophia's presence, whom he could easily ask to clean up, must have been convenient for him. But her promised cleaning had only happened at first. Aurora, the house is a mess. Get up and vacuum. The bathroom is all wet. The frequency of Sophia being at our house increased, and she began to nag me. Influenced by Sophia, my husband started blaming me too, adding to my stress after returning home. Yet, I was somewhat reassured, knowing father-in-law was still at home, even though he was away often. As Sophia's visits became more frequent, another source of stress emerged. My husband started coming home late. Some nights he returned drunk or didn't come home until morning. Sometimes, I could smell perfume on him. When confronted, he said he was hooked on finding new bars to drink at. Stop it! It's okay to go out drinking, but coming home in the morning is not right. And how much are you spending on drinks? I give you enough money, don't I? How I spend my money is my business. Just shut up. I was shocked, as he had never spoken to me like this before. But there was something else I had to confront him about. You're wearing Mark's suits from the closet without permission, aren't you? Do you think that's okay? What? You're using Scarlett's clothes and bags without asking, aren't you? I was dumbfounded. Did he think everything in this house was free for us to use? I have Scarlett's permission, and I always get them cleaned and returned. Have you asked Mark's permission? No, but you can handle that, right? Mark's suits are so cool. They fit me perfectly since we're about the same height. I get a lot of compliments. I felt like exploding with anger. It was obvious that a landlord who could afford such a house would have stylish suits. If he damaged them, my husband wouldn't be able to afford the replacements. Stop it right now! Take care of what you've used and never wear them again. You're so annoying. You really piss me off. I'm at my most popular right now. If you keep nagging, I'll divorce you. Divorce! I felt my love cooling. The man in front of me was no longer the husband I knew. But amidst this, an unexpected event occurred. While away on a fishing trip, father-in-law was involved in an accident and passed away. Caught up in the funeral preparations and arrangements, all my other worries were momentarily forgotten. Just as things were settling down after the 49-day mourning period, my husband made a shocking announcement. I've decided to invite Mom to live with us here. His sudden declaration of living together nearly made me drop the cup I was holding. What? You can't just spring that on me. It's impossible here. Mom's been sad since she suddenly found herself alone, so I thought we'd live together here for a while. Even so, why did he decide this without consulting me? She's moving in next week. Next week? Why didn't you talk to me about this sooner? Sorry, but I thought you would understand. Oh, come on. I was upset by the suddenness, but maybe it was okay for a short while. I was worried about Sophia, who had suddenly lost father-in-law. However, I felt distrust towards my husband for deciding to live with Sophia without any discussion. The following week, to my astonishment, Sophia arrived with movers. Sophia, what's all this luggage about? This place is so much more comfortable than mine, so I thought, why not sell my house and move here? What? Looking at my husband, he was smirking at me. I told you I'd invited Mom to live with us, right? But I said it was impossible here, and it was supposed to be just for a short while. It's so spacious here. One more person won't matter. My husband had intended to live here with Sophia all along. I didn't know what he had told Sophia, but selling her own house, it was giving me a headache. My husband then said something even more absurd. "This is my house. You'll obey your husband's orders. Take good care of Mom." What? Husband? What are you talking about? This is the house that I rented from Scarlett. Had my husband forgotten such an important fact? I know, but I'm the one paying the high rent here now. What? My husband had always been careless about money and possessions. But I never imagined he'd remember so little about this house. Before marriage, he lived in a $250 old apartment. Compared to that, a $1.5K rent must feel very high. But did he seriously think he was renting this place for that price? If you can't obey your husband, then get out of this house. You've become annoyingly complaining lately. That's right. We're living so well thanks to William, and you dare complain? That's a failure as a wife. I felt I understood my husband's plot. Ever since moving here, he enjoyed being fawned over and found me annoying for questioning his spending and late returns. Unaware of his grand misunderstanding, he was trying to kick me out. Fine, I'll leave. But are you sure about this? Yeah, we're getting divorced. I'll live here with Mom. Don't worry, we have Dad's inheritance and the money from selling the house. I'll send the divorce papers to your salon later. So that's why he had invited Sophia. I could have argued, but I decided to let them face reality. I packed my suitcase and left the house silently. This is hopeless. Exiting the high-rise, I sighed deeply and called Scarlett overseas. What? I won't forgive him for doing that to my sister. Just wait a month. I'll come back as soon as I'm ready. Scarlett was furious at my husband's actions and decided to return home 6 months early. About a month later, I received a call from my husband. He had sent me divorce papers right after I left, but I knew this call was about something else. I ignored it for a while, but I finally answered due to the persistent ringing. Aurora? Finally! The management company said they couldn't deduct the rent. I've been transferring it as usual. Please check with Scarlett what's going on. Did you check your bank balance? I did. There's 1.5K in it. I barely contained my laughter. I hadn't transferred anything to the account for rent deductions, and I had withdrawn the balance after leaving the high-rise. With only 1.5K, they wouldn't even deduct the heating bill, let alone the rent. Must be embarrassing to have no electricity in the luxury apartment. Why didn't you put the money in? What? Why should I pay the heating bill for a house I don't even live in? Realizing that he had said something absurd, my husband fell silent. You have the day off tomorrow, right? I'll come over so we can talk. Ah, okay. I understand. Please do. His disappointment was palpable, even over the phone. He really got carried away. I'll make sure he cleans up this mess. The next day, I went to the high-rise apartment with Scarlett, who had just returned from abroad. I could have used my key, but I decided to ring the doorbell. Sophia answered the door. Hello, who might you be? Aurora? Why have you come back? Didn't you get divorced? Yes, we got divorced, so I've come to vacate the apartment. What? Sophia, surprised, was followed by my husband, looking uncomfortable. He hadn't yet informed Sophia about the current situation, but the moment he saw Scarlett standing behind me, his eyes widened. Scarlett? Why are you here? I rushed back from abroad after Aurora called me. Oh, and this is Thomas, the owner and manager of this apartment. We had informed Thomas about our discussion, and he agreed to join us. Entering the living room, I was shocked by what I saw. The once lovely space looked like a warehouse now. Sophia's moving boxes were still piled up in the corner of the room. Scarlett sighed quietly beside me. We all sat on the sofa, and Thomas was the first to speak. So, when can we expect this month's rent payment? No, I've transferred the usual 1.5K to the account, but it seems it wasn't deducted. My husband, sweating and speaking nervously, looked pitiful. His hair was messy, as in the old days. You seriously thought it was 1.5K? Didn't I ask you to pay only half of the rent at first? Remember? What? Really? Half means it was actually 3K? Think I kind of remember something about half. My husband looked shocked and then scratched his head in frustration. It's a little fascinating how he completely forgets things he's not interested in. Yes, 3K. but the actual rent here is $15K. What? $15K? Maybe I only heard about the amount we were supposed to pay. Not we, but rather the amount he was supposed to pay. Sophia, standing beside my husband, also had her eyes wide open in shock. What? What do you mean? Isn't this a high-rise apartment William is renting from an acquaintance? No, it's a high-rise I'm renting from Scarlett. I had it for 2 years, but due to recent events, I've decided to terminate the lease 6 months early. Sophia turned pale, hitting my husband's knee in panic. What are we going to do? I thought William was earning well, so I sold my house, and I've done so much shopping. What now? Sophia covered her mouth with her hands, trembling, but then she turned to Scarlett. Scarlett, then why don't you rent it to William and me for $1.5K, just for half a year? I can't give up this lifestyle so soon. Scarlett's mouth turned down at Sophia's audacious request. Look, Aurora, please ask her too. You know, you could even move back in here if you want. I could feel my own mouth turning down, mirroring Scarlett's. I rented this place to support Aurora's efforts. I will not forgive anyone who tries to drive her out. Scarlett's gaze made my husband close his eyes and look down, but leaving here would not be the end of it. Still, you've treated everything so carelessly. This sofa, for example, I can't even think of using it anymore. Scarlett frowned as she looked at the stains and dirt on the pure white leather sofa. Originally, I planned to have you buy any severely worn items after 2 years, so we'll have to check everything now. What? Wait a minute. I didn't hear anything about this. My husband, who had been looking down, raised his head, sounding surprised. In a normal rental, you restore things to their original state. It's only fair to compensate if you've mishandled furniture and appliances. I had explained this too, but with him not even remembering the rent, these details wouldn't even be at the back of his mind. Scarlett walked around the room, checking everything. I heard many sighs from the kitchen, so it's likely that the appliances will have to be bought. Then, opening the bedroom closet, Scarlett sighed even more deeply. William, did you wear marked suits without permission? I didn't say you could borrow personal items, and you've treated them pretty roughly. Sorry, but you'll have to buy these at full price. Just as I thought, despite my warnings to not wear them again. As expected, each suit in the closet was worth over $5K. The only consolation was that he had only worn 3 of them. William, I am so disappointed in you. I trusted you and Aurora. That's why I rented this house to you. You've hurt my dear Aurora, and I have no sympathy for you. My husband was already trembling, pale as a ghost. The amount Scarlett mentioned for the suits was significant. Then Thomas, adding insult to injury, began to speak. As for me, I would like to request the payment of this month's $15K rent, plus the cleaning fees for the room. The $3K rent was in agreement with Aurora, not with you. And I would like you to vacate the premises immediately. But it's impossible to leave right away. Aurora, you asked them too. Sophia, who had been sulking, looked up and shouted. Why should I? The divorce papers William sent have already been filed. We're strangers now. I have no obligation to help a stranger. Thomas, looking pitifully at Sophia, laid out the harsh reality. If you can't vacate immediately, we will have to charge you with illegal occupation. Why do I have to go through this? I can't take it anymore. Sophia screamed and stood up, then left the room. My husband, soulless for a while, finally looked at me, begging for help. Aurora, I'm sorry. I've finally come to my senses. Got carried away with being fawned over and felt like a rich man and lost my mind. Yes, you're finally back to your senses. I'm really sorry. I was wrong. Let's start over from scratch somewhere new. But his words no longer resonated with me. The trust was broken, and I had heard rumors of his womanizing. It's impossible. As I said earlier, our divorce is finalized. I filed the divorce papers in anger, but after a month, I have no regrets and have completely moved on. I looked at my husband with a full smile. Seeing my face, he seemed to give up and asked quietly, You paid most of the rent except my half, right? How much are you earning now? I realized we hadn't talked about work for a long time. I finally exceeded $8K a month, Looks like I'll reach 10K by the end of the year. No way. Why didn't you tell me? Please, let's start over. My husband slid off the sofa and collapsed onto the floor, crying. His hair, still messy, swayed. I wished he had stayed the same bedhead guy from back then. Even though I thought I was over it, I felt a little sad. Later, scared by the threat of illegal occupation, the two quickly rented a monthly apartment and left. They managed to pay and compensate with father-in-law's inheritance and the money from selling their house, but their finances were greatly depleted. Well, my husband isn't a bad earner, and living with his means, he'll manage. After the divorce, I received an apology from him once. I don't want to reconcile, but I truly wish him well. But he lamented, "It's hard to lower your standard of living once it's raised." He was grieving for Sophia, who lives with him. Thinking of Sophia, who enjoys hobbies and luxuries, their future seems full of uncertainties. I didn't demand any alimony. Some might think it's too kind, but I felt responsible for changing my carefree, bedheaded husband. In that environment, I changed my mindset to earning as much as I thought was normal. Thanks to that, my activities are expanding. But my husband and Sophia only used that environment to raise their living standards, without realizing their mistake. Now, I live alone in a 1.8K apartment. Not quite Scarlett's level, but compared to barely managing $900 a month, I feel much more self-affirmed. I want to keep believing in myself and fulfill my dreams.
30 cents should be enough for a gift for your mother, he said. And I have work tomorrow, so just handle the funeral by yourself. The day before my mother's funeral, that's what my husband told me. What is he even saying? His words stirred a dark emotion deep within me. If it were acceptable, I'd punch him right now. Absolutely unforgivable. Well, then your thing is also worthy 30 cents, I retorted. I decided to exact the worst revenge possible on my husband. My name is Katie. I'm 28 years old. A year ago, I married James, who is the same age as me. Both of us were office workers, but at different companies. I met my husband a year ago at a dinner party hosted by a colleague of mine. Having no experience with men, I was hesitant to go at first and initially declined. My colleague insisted, so I reluctantly agreed, though I knew I was just there to make up numbers. I won't have much to contribute to the conversation anyway. I'll just get through it and go home. On the day of the dinner party, I was thinking this all the way on the train to the venue. I'm more of an indoor person, preferring to read books, and I'm shy. As a result, I don't have many friends of the same sex, let alone male friends. So, with these anxious thoughts, the dinner party began. Sitting quietly at the edge, sipping my drink, someone said to me, "It's no fun drinking alone, isn't it?" That was James. The most handsome and outgoing of the group. I couldn't understand why he was so eager to talk to me, especially with more attractive and vivacious women around. Initially, I thought him frivolous and was wary, but I found myself warming up to him as the conversation flowed. As the party was wrapping up, he asked, "Hey, can we exchange contact information?" Confused but flattered, I agreed, and we went our separate ways. The next day, I got a message from him. "I'd like to see you alone next time." Seeing that message, I wondered if I was dreaming. Never having been asked out by a man before, I half suspected it was a joke. Really? Then yes, let's meet. Elated by James's invitation, I accepted. A week later, I went out to dinner with James. After several dates, he confessed his feelings. Having never had a boyfriend, I was overjoyed at my first ever confession, practically jumping for joy. Of course, I'd be happy too. I went home and told my mother about my new boyfriend, her gaze drifting to my father's portrait. He had passed away about 10 years ago. Seeing my mother, who had raised me alone since then, smiling at my father's photo as she reported the news, I was so happy I cried. James, who had lost his parents when he was young, understood my pain of not having a father. Several months into our relationship, James proposed to me. I'm so happy, but I need to think about it because of Mom. I was truly delighted, but I asked for time to think about his proposal. A month into our relationship, we discovered that my mother had terminal colon cancer and only 6 months to live. I had told James about it, that she might pass away soon. I definitely wanted to marry him, but I also wanted to spend as much time as possible with my mother, and my heart was torn. Seeing my dilemma, James said firmly, I want to help with your mother's care. More than anything, I want her to see you in a wedding dress while she's still here. Overwhelmed by his words, I broke down in tears. To marry someone who cared so much about me was a true blessing. I'm so happy. Thank you. I'd be honored. And so, I married James, and our life as a couple began. I believed that a happy life was starting for us, but that happiness didn't last long. About a month after our wedding, his attitude changed drastically. He used to be so kind when we were dating, but now he pushed all the housework onto me, citing tiredness from work. Hey, dinner's ready! No matter how loudly I called, he wouldn't come right away unless it was something serious. His room was upstairs and he couldn't hear me over the loud TV. This pattern of me calling and him eventually showing up in the dining room continued daily. Even on weekends, he'd say, I'm going out with friends today, so take care of the housework, leaving me to handle everything. I was getting frustrated with my husband. Another month of this, and I reached my breaking point. I work too, you know, help out with the housework on the weekends, I said. But he responded lazily, Can't help it, I have social obligations. You wouldn't understand since you don't have many friends. I thought it was horrible of him to say that to my face, but I didn't want to argue any further and kept silent. I realized I was tasting blood in my mouth. I had been biting my lip, enduring his words to the point of drawing blood. I was so filled with anger that I wanted to storm out right then. From the next day, his uncooperative behavior only escalated. Your cooking is terrible. I'd rather eat instant food. Do you even clean? It doesn't look like it. He complained about my housework. And then, you should be grateful a guy like me married someone as gloomy as you. He started hurling insults. Wondering why he married me if he felt that way, I asked him. I thought you'd be convenient since you're not the type of fool around with men and would do all the housework. Shocked by his words, I felt like I could lose it. I wanted to believe that he said about my mother back then was true. But did you say you'd help with Mom, right? I asked, anxious. Oh, that. Didn't really care about your mother. Just said that to look good for the marriage. He blatantly denied. I was so filled with rage, I thought of hitting him right there. But I endured. I considered divorce, but feared I might never get another chance if I gave up on this marriage. 3 months later, I got a sudden call from the hospital where my mother was admitted. Katie, your mother's condition has worsened. Please come quickly. the nurse said. I had braced myself, knowing her prognosis, but still went blank when the moment came. I was silent for about a minute, before understanding. "Got it, I'm on my way," I said, regaining my composure, and headed to the hospital. "Mom, please stay alive until I get there." That was my wish on the way, but when I entered her room, she had already passed away. "Why did you die before I got here, Mom? Wake up! Please wake up!" I knew she wouldn't respond, but I couldn't believe she was gone and kept calling out to her. After calming down, I called my husband. "Mom just passed away. Can you come to the hospital?" "No, I'm too busy with work." He didn't show up, even though his mother-in-law had died. The next day, I started preparing for the funeral, but as usual, he just lazed around at home. It was Saturday, his day off. I was busy with funeral arrangements and could have used some help with the housework. I got so annoyed with his idleness. "Why don't you go out like you usually do?" I ended up saying that to my husband. "If that's what you want, I'll do just that," he said with a smile and left the house. How can he go out for fun at a time like this? That night, when he returned from his outing, I tried to talk to him about the funeral arrangements for the next day. "Hey, about tomorrow's funeral process. I'm not going to the funeral tomorrow." "What? Are you joking? I don't understand what you're saying. She was your mother-in-law. You can't just not show up." "Can't help it. I've got a business trip starting tomorrow. I can call your office for you." Always using work as an excuse, does he really think that will fly? I grabbed his mobile phone to call his office, but he shouted, "Don't do anything, stupid!" And I couldn't proceed any further. "I can't go to the funeral, but I'll give a gift, here." He placed 3 dimes on the table. What kind of joke is this at a time like this? I never owed your mother anything. That's more than enough. This man is unbelievable. I've never felt such anger towards him before. I wanted to hit him right there. As expected, he didn't show up at the funeral the next day. The funeral went smoothly, and I was able to send my mother off peacefully. 3 days later, I went out for lunch with Sarah, a friend who attended the funeral. It was nice to have a leisurely lunch with Sarah after so long, and we enjoyed our conversation. As we were about to leave, Sarah said something. "I saw James walking with another woman in town, right after you got married," she whispered, sounding apologetic. "What? That can't be true. Maybe you're mistaken." I brushed it off at the time, but remembering my husband's frivolous nature, I wondered if it could be true. 2 days later, I snooped through his phone while he was in the bath. Luckily, he didn't set a passcode, probably never thinking I'd pry. He probably didn't expect me to look into his mobile phone and was caught off guard. I'll see with my own eyes whether my husband is really cheating. The messages were clear evidence of an affair. "I want to see you right now. I prefer you over such a plain woman." In the photo folder, there were many pictures of them together, likely taken weekly. Sarah was right. He was cheating. I also checked the calendar and found plans for a trip with his mistress. Wait, this date is the day of Mom's funeral. He lied about going on a business trip on the day of my mother's funeral, but he was actually on a trip with his mistress. I was so angry I almost smashed his phone. But I needed the evidence, so I copied the photos and messages to my phone. After replacing his phone, I reviewed the copied messages. From that email, I also learned the name of the person he was having an affair with. Apparently, she's a junior colleague who works at the same company as my husband. He didn't show his face when my mother died, claiming work, but he was doing this? Unforgivable. The next day, I took the evidence to a lawyer's office, seeking advice and representation for a divorce. I was determined to make him pay. That's what I decided. That night, he said, "In a month, there's my boss's wedding. Prepare a gift. He wants you to come too, so keep that day free." Okay, a month later, got it. I agreed to attend the wedding, but of course, that was out of the question. I had no grudge against my husband's company president, but I had no intention of going to the wedding. I decided to cancel at the last minute, just like he did, to inconvenience him. During that month, I began to take steps for my revenge. First, I consulted my husband about a dress to wear on the day to gain his trust. "Hey, I can't be underdressed when meeting your boss, right? I don't really have a good party dress. Shall we go look for one?" So, I persuaded him to go dress shopping with me. For the boss's wedding, he was quite keen and bought me a beautiful party dress. He never buys me nice clothes like this usually. What a self-serving creature he is. I momentarily showed my disdain, but then said, "Thank you, I'm looking forward to wearing this at the wedding." I emphasized my excitement for the wedding day so he wouldn't suspect anything. Next was the wedding gift he asked me to prepare. It looked lavish, but it was only worth 30 cents inside. He would never check it anyway. And a month later, then, the day before the wedding arrived. "I'm sorry, I have work tomorrow and I can't make it to the wedding." Of course, that was a complete lie. "What are you saying at the last minute? Just take a day off. And what about that dress I bought you? You said you were looking forward to wearing it." He was furious. "I'm just doing the same thing you did, but it can't be helped. You also prioritize work when it's really important, right? Like when you skipped my mom's funeral." He was annoyed but didn't say anything more. On the morning of the wedding, I handed him the gift. "Here is the gift for the wedding," I said and handed it to my husband. "Alright, I'm off then." Still in a bad mood from yesterday, he left for the wedding. I couldn't stop laughing. I had filled the gift with only 30 cents, just like he did for my mother. He had made a mockery of my mother's funeral and went on an affair trip instead of attending. And yet he expected a proper gift for his boss's wedding. That night, when he returned, he immediately started yelling at me. "What kind of joke is this? You've made me look like a fool." "What joke? What are you talking about?" I feigned ignorance as he raged at me. "The president called me on the way home. The gift only had children's toys in it. I was in a panic." "Well, you only gave 30 cents for my mom's funeral. You said that was enough since you didn't owe her anything. I didn't owe your boss anything, so I thought it was fine." I had just returned the favor he did to my mother. What kind of attitude is that? I owe my boss for employing me, and I'm grateful. I never thought you could be so lacking in common sense. I can't live with someone who can't even support her husband. Let's get a divorce. I didn't miss him mentioning divorce. Divorce? Fine by me. I don't need a man who skips his mother-in-law's funeral for an affair. I confronted him. As soon as I brought up the affair, he became visibly agitated. "It's not like that. I really had work that time." He struggled to find words, desperately making excuses. "If you think you'll get through it easily, you're wrong." "What? Did you think I didn't know? Then how do you explain this? You two look really close, and these emails too. I showed him the evidence I had copied. The emails were full of insults about me. I can't have kids with such an ugly woman. I feel sorry for any child born from her. Can't wait for the weekend. I just tell her I'm going out with friends and she doesn't say anything. There were things written there that made fun of me. I read these out loud and asked, "Still going to pretend you didn't know?" Seeing the emails, photos and schedules I had copied, my husband couldn't respond to my questions. "You once said I was just a convenient woman for you, remember? Even then, I didn't want a divorce and tolerated it because I was blinded by marriage. But to think you were cheating, I'm not so nice as to let myself be walked over forever." I became emotional, raising my voice as I recalled what he had said to me before. Despite everything, my husband remained silent, not answering any of my questions. "If you have nothing to say, it means you admit it, right? And you said we should get a divorce earlier, right? Then sign these divorce papers. By the way, I've already consulted a lawyer about your affair and will be seeking compensation from you and your mistress." To that, he readily admitted to the affair. "Fine. How much?" "You'll pay $30,000 and she will pay $10,000. I told him the amounts. He was shocked by the $30,000, but ultimately agreed to pay it, though he asked to make payments over time. "Fine, but if you miss a payment, you'll have to pay the remaining amount in full by any means necessary." I added that condition to his request for installment payments. "All right, I agreed to those terms. I'll definitely pay." We both agreed to the terms, and it seemed like things were settled for the moment. "Call your mistress. I know her name, workplace, and age, but I don't know her address." "I can't give you her address." He still tried to protect his mistress. "Still defending her? Just call her now," I demanded, and he hurriedly called her. "Hey, it's me. Someone wants to talk to you." I took the phone, trying to stay calm and ruthless. "Hello, this is James' wife, Katie. Thanks for always taking care of my husband. I need to confirm something and asked him to hand you the phone." As soon as I said that, she realized her affair was discovered. "I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop." She began apologizing, sounding tearful. "No need for apologies. You must have had a great time. I just need your address to send the compensation bill." Ignoring her apology, I demanded her address for the compensation claim. The next day, I sent the claim to the address obtained through a lawyer. 2 days later, as I was packing my things to leave his house, he apologized. "I'm really sorry. I've been reflecting." It's too late for apologies now. The humiliation I suffered from you will never heal, and I will never forgive you. Enjoy your life with her. With that, I left the house. Riding the train back to my parents' home, tears streamed down. It was a short marriage of only half a year, but I was glad to get away from such a man. His panicked face when I confronted him was priceless. Thinking this, I headed back to my empty family home. A month later, back at my parents' home, I was living comfortably without any more demeaning commands. Then, my ex-husband called. I didn't have anything special to do, so I answered the phone wondering what was going on. "Hello, what's up?" "I got fired for the affair. I can't pay this month's compensation." He was asking for a delay in payment. "That's not my problem. Find a way to pay by the deadline." But I have no one to turn to. How pathetic. Even his mistress had paid her part immediately in full. Ask the woman you had an affair with to cover it. We broke up right after, and now she's out of contact. Hearing his words, I burst out laughing. He got what he deserved for disrespecting my mother and going on an affair trip instead of attending her funeral. That's great to hear. I couldn't help but let my emotions show as I said this to my ex-husband and hung up. In the end, he never missed a payment, not that month or in the months after. He probably hoped for my sympathy to save his money. My first marriage was ruined by an awful man, but 2 years after leaving him, I found a boyfriend. After 2 years of dating, we're getting married next month. Unlike my ex-husband, he is genuinely sincere and very kind to me. I did worry that he might change after marriage and stop doing household chores like my ex did. A year into our relationship, I started living together with my current boyfriend, George. It felt a bit like testing him, but his kindness didn't change after moving in together, and he actively did household chores without me saying anything. On our days off, we always went out on dates together. Will you keep going out with me and being kind to me after we're married? Of course, he said with a smile in response to my question. Seeing him, I felt that I could be happy with him. There may be tough times ahead, but I hope that our marriage will bring more happiness than hardship.